You are now listening to the sound of Bernard Herrmann's awesome score for North by Northwest, which only gets repeated about 9,000 times in the course of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, you're not listening to that at all. I lied. You're listening to Sanity at the Movies, North by Northwest edition. A title, by the way, in case you didn't notice, dear listener, that makes no sense. I mean, it sort of makes sense because they go northwest, but the title doesn't really mean anything. It's not thematically connected to anything. The train, I don't think, is called the Northwest, is it?
There was Northwest Airlines at some point.
Right.
Yeah.
They mentioned Northwest Airlines, but apparently that was just the only... Hitchcock wanted to... Originally, when he conceived of this movie, he conceived of a movie where a man would end up in the nose of Thomas Jefferson and then be found by the bad guys when he sneezed. So the working title of this movie was The Man in Jefferson's Nose, or even The Man Who Sneezed in Jefferson's Nose. But somehow, unfortunately for the world, that did not make it to the final.
Wow. It's good to remember that Hitchcock he liked his jokes.
Hitchcock did like his jokes. I don't know if you noticed that in this movie.
I did not.
Hitchcock.
We may be running from bad guys, and they may be around every corner, but we're going to get our quips in.
We are going. Yeah, well, yeah. This is a quippy movie, wonderfully so, I would say, for the most part. Anyway, guys, I guess we should introduce ourselves and talk about this film. A film that we often allude to and have a lot recently, I think. Probably mostly because of James Bond, because this is definitely a precursor.
Very proto James Bond.
Yeah, and released 4 years before Dr. No, unless my memory of dates deserts me, which it may. Dr. No, I think, is 63, and I know this movie is 59. So this movie down to the way...
62.
62, okay, so just 3 years. But this movie is so influential on the Bond franchise. The suits, I mean, specifically, just even the way that Cary Grant is dressed is very much the way that, what's his face? Sean Connery ended up dressing this particular kind of suit, the way, the gray flannel. Anyway, that's all things we can talk about it. But first, let's talk about who we are. I'm Nathan. I'm your humble and obedient host. You're listening to Sanity at the Movies. That's Ben. He's the pastor who's a master of cinema. Right up there with Brett
I didn't know that. Here I am.
Yeah. No. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, boy. I stole it from Jake.
Yeah, that's my title.
Ben.
Yeah, no wonder I didn't know that.
I'm sorry. I'm going to have to take it back.
I should have anti-known that. I mean, yeah, you can have it back.
And unless you want to hold on to it. I mean, I cannot take it once I give, but I'd like to humbly ask for it back because it really belongs to Jake.
I humbly give it back.
Okay. All right. Ben is not and never has been the pastor who's a master of cinema.
Actually, I was for just a minute.
You were for a moment. Yes.
How did it feel?
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Yep.
Good.
Yep.
Yeah.
The master of cinema was getting a phone call, and you chose to slide into his booth, and it set off a chain reaction of mistaken identity and...
Yeah. Yep.
No. The real pastor who's a master of the cinema, I guess I'll just go ahead and introduce him. It's Jake Menzel.
It's me.
How are you doing, Jake?
Okay. How are you?
You run from any corn dusters? Crop
dusters.
Crop dusters lately?
Nope. Don't see any crop dusters around here.
No, it's not really a thing.
It's not a thing.
It's not a thing. I think I have seen in my life a crop duster before, like dusting a field, but it's been because I'm driving somewhere across this great land we call America, and
maybe out west somewhere. It's a thing.
Yeah, but it's not like you're just driving along the Indiana cornfields from Evansville to Bloomington or something like that, and you suddenly see a crop duster.
That crop duster was supposedly in Indiana, but
that's right. That is Indiana.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
but and maybe there were in the 50s and 60s, but ain't how we treat things nowadays around here.
Ain't how we treat things nowadays. Although a crop duster did save America from the aliens. If you guys remember.
Yeah.
Jake, why don't you introduce the person who we accidentally stole your title? In a sign of regal graciousness, why don't you introduce this person who tried to steal from you?
This is a turn of events.
Yeah.
To be sure.
It's okay. A lot of people try to steal from me.
Yep.
I don't understand why they wouldn't want to.
Mm-hmm.
I have so much.
Do you know how many podcasts there are where three guys talk about movies out there?
It's trying to be us.
Yeah, all stealing from us.
Yeah. This is Ben Sulcer. He is the preacher who's a teacher of cinema.
Right.
There we go. That sounds fitting.
Yes. How we doing, Ben?
I'm all right.
Have you run from any crop dusters lately?
It's been a while.
It's been a while.
It has. Yep. Not since I was a small child.
Not since you were a small child.
Yeah.
Yes, when you got mistaken for a secret agent. Oh, man. Was there ever a movie that had a more boring stretches of like exposition right in the middle where they're like, we're going to explain the same plot 2 or 3 times?
Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness.
Uh,
Or just the boring expositional love scenes. It's like,
well, I assume we're going to have a lot to say
goodness.
about those love scenes because I think that's why this comes up frequently in our discussions, because this is one of our touch points for they had eroticism back before the 90s. If you weren't aware, in fact, they were rather better at it
yeah.
in some perverse ways. Just because they didn't show a lot of flesh doesn't mean they couldn't show a lot of something.
Yeah.
I think that's
It doesn't mean they couldn't be evocative.
doesn't mean they couldn't be evocative. That's true. This movie is nothing if not evocative, but we'll talk about that. This is, of course, our first Hitchcock. We have not managed to do a Hitchcock before, and we're coming out right out of the gate with a movie that was billed and conceived as the Hitchcock movie to end all Hitchcock movies. That's like what they were trying to write when they came up with the screenplay. So this movie was kind of thought of like I read this very snooty New Yorker review, and they're like, Hitchcock is finally parodying himself. You know, it's like Hitchcock's just doing all the Hitchcock tropes and he's stuffing them all into one movie, from the icy cool blonde to the different landmarks that have suspense scenes put around them to the case of wrongful identity. Case of wrongful identity? Is that a phrase? No.
It is now.
It is now.
A case of mistaken identity. It's just like, this is one big package of every trope, every trick, everything that Hitchcock liked to do, he did in this movie. Yeah, we're starting with it. Maybe we'll work our way back to some more primal Hitchcock someday, like Notorious or Spellbound or The Wrong Steps, or I don't know, assume if this podcast goes long enough, we'll do lots of Hitchcock because he's a master. But, and obviously, you know, if you're going to do a movie podcast, eventually you got to talk about Rear Window, Psycho, things like that. But North by Northwest is more likable than those. So we're starting here. Anyway, North by Northwest and Alfred Hitchcock. What baggage do you guys bring to the films of Alfred Hitchcock? Ben?
Well, AJ.
Yeah, I am tempted to respond as BJ today in general. For whatever reason, I saw this as a little kid, this particular movie, or I saw parts of it. I just remember I was a pretty little kid. My mom fell asleep, and I was watching Cary Grant climb out of the hospital window. So it was like, I remember the most exciting to me.
Yeah.
The final third, final fourth, final fifth of the movie.
Right.
Cary Grant climbs around the hospital building, and then he climbs the bad guy's house in the dark, and really fun. So that stuck in my mind as the thing.
Yeah.
And
man, that house. We'll talk about that house, but that house rocks.
the house
Anyway,
is pretty awesome. Yeah. I don't know what other baggage I bring. I was raised knowing that Hitchcock was awesome for whatever reason. I was told that.
Right.
And then we watched some movies. We watched Man Who Knew Too Much. We watched maybe not a lot else. I know I've seen a couple of other things. Dial M for Murder. We watched Dial M for Murder. And at some point, this. Although maybe not the whole thing until I was a lot older.
Now, that's an important thing to note, is that Hitchcock is a household name, and he's a household name, particularly of our parents' generation. Everybody knows who Alfred Hitchcock is, and they know what his brand is. He's a brand. And so, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have a volume of short stories at my house that are Alfred Hitchcock Presents.
Tales of Suspense and Mystery or something.
Something like that.
I've seen those books around before.
Yeah.
I don't know how I came by it, but it's just like the kind of thing anybody might have in their house.
Right. Well, he was a master of self-promotion, and people know who he is, and particularly our parents' generation. I don't know, Jake, what's your baggage with old Hitch?
Not a lot. I mean, I know.
By Hitch, I mean the Will Smith movie. If you can tell us all about your baggage with...
You know, it's sweet. And
is it? I've actually never seen it.
Isn't that the one where he's like the
Yeah, I haven't seen it either. I've heard,
I've
heard it's good.
That's okay. Yeah, I was thinking of Hancock, which always looked dumb to me.
Yeah, I never saw that
yeah.
one
either.
Yeah,
I remember Hitch as being a sweet nothing of a Will Smith rom-com.
There you go. Well, what about
he's funny and cute and charming, then he'll be funny and cute and charming in a rom-com, and then you'll forget about it.
What about Alfred Hitchcock? What kind of baggage do you have with him?
Not a whole lot, really. Just, always knowing sort of who he is and knowing the cultural baggage of Psycho or The Birds or whatever and everything that's downstream of it without ever really bothering with much of it, at least growing up. I've backfilled some of that since then. I've seen North by Northwest before.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't know. Probably my real entry into Hitchcock was as much rounding out the Jimmy Stewart of it all as it was rounding out backfilling Hitchcock himself.
Yeah.
So
Rope and
Rear Window and
right. Rear Window I did see as a teen. Forgot that one.
The Man Who Knew Too Much.
Yeah.
Yep.
Those are all great in their way. I think Hitchcock did 4 Stewarts and 4 Grants.
What was the fourth Stewart?
Well, maybe he just did.
No, you're right. Vertigo.
Yeah,
which I still haven't
Vertigo,
seen.
So Vertigo, Rear Window, Man Who Knew,
And Rope.
Yeah.
And Rope is actually the one that I haven't seen
Right.
of those 4.
Yeah.
Well, he certainly knew how to bring
worth
something
seeing.
out in Jimmy Stewart. If the subtext of George Bailey is that he's kind of an angular, angry, sarcastic guy, then Hitchcock knew how to make that into text for Jimmy Stewart.
Yeah, he sure did.
Yeah.
And
make him a lot less likable.
yeah, but it's interesting. I mean,
That's why you do it. It's like, oh, here's like, one of the most likable leading men in Hollywood history, and
basically all the same mannerisms and tics and stuff, but
yeah.
he doesn't like me, and he doesn't like the other characters in the movie, and he
I
doesn't.
don't know that he likes being there.
Stewart still compels you to watch him.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
he's awesome. He's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we almost did Vertigo, but we decided it would be, better to start with North by Northwest. And we've been talking a lot about James Bond recently, and North by Northwest relates to James Bond pretty directly, as we've said. So my baggage with Hitchcock is, I don't know, if you're like a film nerd type person, then once you've exhausted Spielberg and some of like the absolute most obvious stuff in the world, once you've seen the Star Warses and you're starting to want to take some steps into a larger world, I feel like oftentimes, especially with young men, you start with the horror guys or the suspense guys or the people who have violent action of some type because it just sounds more fun than discovering the French New Wave or something like that. So
Turns out it is more fun.
It turns out it is
the French New Wave.
Right. Well, watching paint dry is more fun than discovering the French New Wave. So, yeah, I mean, Kubrick and Hitchcock were I associate them with Nathan's a 14, 15-year-old. He's going to rent everything from the library, or we had local video stores that you had you can get 6 video cassettes, for $6, the Friday rental deal or something like that. So I would go in swaths of, I'm going to watch all the Kubrick and I'm going to watch all the Hitchcock and I'm going to watch all the this and the that and the other thing. And so Hitchcock was definitely one of those. And I think he straddled the line. Like Kubrick, I remember being very dynamic and like those movies just worked. They were as provocative as they were intended to be. Time had not dulled the intensity of something like The Shining or Clockwork Orange. I mean, obviously those movies are still considered to be pretty provocative. And I don't know that I am pleased that 14-year-old Nathan watched them, but he did. Hitchcock, on the other hand, it was kind of always hit and miss as to whether it would still hold up in the same way. I think I had enough I was enough of a connoisseur that I always enjoyed it. And I always enjoyed stepping into this world of, especially the things like North by Northwest. I like the dialogue and the class and the wit and the kind of the elegance of it. But it always felt like this isn't the tempo of a modern movie. This, the action scenes aren't the way that action's done now, even though you can clearly see the influence. Like you have to put on your film buff brain a little bit. It doesn't just translate directly into the adrenaline rush that it would have been for people back then. When I watch them now, I think I've just watched so much old film that like my new film brain and my old film brain have kind of just merged at this point. So I can't actually get excited about something like the crop duster scene or some of the scare scenes in Psycho or things like that. But he's one of those directors that's fun for people who are discovering cinema to watch because he's doing a lot and it's so obvious what he's doing. I mean, that's the other reason that people like Kubrick and Hitchcock are often, kind of first stops on a film education, because it's obviously designed. You know, there's nothing that's designed to not feel designed. There's
nothing about it that's made to feel subtle.
Right. It's just, this is film art. We are cutting in a pattern. These shots are composed. They are obviously composed. There's nothing about this that doesn't scream artifice in some ways, but it screams artifice in delightful ways often. This is all designed. There's obviously an authorial voice behind this. That was very exciting. Hitchcock still, I think, is one of the most exciting directors for a young film buff to watch, because you can see what he's doing. You can always kind of see like what the strategy is, and he's always ahead of you. I mean, he's a genius, and so much but it's fun to watch. I've never really bought into the whole school of art should pretend like it's not art, or it should hide itself. It should be subtle. I like writers who show off. I like directors who show off. I like, we talked about this with Zack Snyder. Every moment of his movie is a movie.
Yeah. Well, it's a question of whether or not that showing off actually serves what you're doing.
Right.
Right. Well, I was just having a conversation about this with somebody who goes to our church, who's been filling out his back catalog of reading, and he's reading Something Wicked This Way Comes and discovering Bradbury's very purple prose and trying to figure out how to process that.
Right.
Is it wrong if he isn't a huge fan of it? Is he, why does he make me have to read this 3 times to figure out what he's trying to describe about this train?
Right. And the answer is Bradbury can be very annoying and get in his way and get it in his own way. Yeah. And so can Zack Snyder, and so can all kinds of, it's not that it's always good to show off, but when Bradbury connects with the pitch, nobody's better. I mean, I don't know how often he really does that to my adult brain. But there are passages in Something Wicked that are very beautiful and very evocative about the fall, or about the evil train pulling in at 3:00 in the morning, the witching hour. There's stuff that lives with me, and there's stuff in Justice League that lives with me, and I don't know. Yeah. So what'd you tell him?
I just said, yeah, same sort of thing. Style can be used to good effect or bad effect. You don't have to like it.
Right.
Some of it's just a matter of taste.
Right.
But he's doing everything that he's doing. I think I even said, lots of places Bradbury does that sort of thing to bad effect. I think he does it to pretty good effect in Something Wicked.
Something Wicked is his best, I'd say, along with a handful of short stories. Yeah. I mean, what's insufferable, I think, is when someone's putting on style, when style is not organic to the thing that they're doing, the story they're telling, the piece of art that they're doing, or when the style doesn't seem to arise organically out of who they are. But with somebody like
they're putting on somebody else's style.
Right. But with Bradbury, it's like, that guy just didn't know how to do anything else. Like, that's who he was. He was just really excited to tell you about everything, and he's not putting it on. That's just who he is. You don't have to love it, but it's who he is. And same thing for someone like Alfred Hitchcock. It is ironic, and it is thoughtful. It's not like Hitchcock's just like spontaneously dancing as he creates all this stuff, but it comes out of his own irony. It comes out of his own methodical way of thinking about suspense. And
I think that it'll be more suspenseful if, instead of like any normal human being would, we have Cary Grant just run away. If he first hop into a strategic crouch pose,
right,
freeze there while we, get the crop duster behind him, and we have it all move, and then he moves.
Right.
He's gonna. How many times does Grant hop into a crouching pose with his arms like?
Right.
Like.
Well,
like how many times do we see that from Cary Grant? Like, which I know our listeners can't see that, but
if you watch the movie, you saw it.
You saw it 5,000 times, and it's part of, I'm creating suspense. This isn't art. I'm not trying to be a realist here.
Right. Well, one of the things that Hitchcock, by the way, I guess we could just talk about Hitchcock, but one of the things that Hitchcock believed in and helped pioneer, along with other people, it's easy to give somebody like Alfred Hitchcock all the credit for coming up with the things that he does most splashily, but he's part of film movements and film history, and other people were doing these things. But one of the things that Hitchcock really believed in was the compression and the elongation of time. He said that's what cinema does well and does to emotional effect. And so let's compress the boring parts as much as possible. But you watch a Hitchcock movie now and you're like, we could use a little bit more compression of these boring parts. But for the time, he was really compressing the boring parts. And let's elongate the exciting parts. Let's not worry about realism. Let's not worry about what a guy would really do if an assassin was coming after him or a crop duster was bearing down on him. Let's figure out how we can visually stretch this out and make theater out of this and delay the payoff as long as possible. And so you watch any modern movie where this movie actually has the moment where, you know, they're clinging on and the bad guy comes and he's going to crush his hand. But you watch that moment in any movie now and it goes on forever and it slows down. And that's Hitchcock's influence, you know, just the idea that the suspenseful thing is happening now. So let's slow down.
Linger.
Let's linger. Let's delay the payoff as much as possible. That's what he does. And some of it just because
The longer I can credibly keep you on the edge of your seat, the more satisfying it'll be when we give you the payoff.
Right. Right. And
Let's milk that.
And the payoff doesn't even matter. I mean, that's the wonderful thing actually about the final moment with Eve Kendall in this movie is who cares how he got her off of the mountain?
It did not matter.
The only thing that's interesting is the fact that she's dangling there. So let's cut to the chase here.
Now they're in bed.
Yeah, let's cut to our saucy joke. All right, let me give a little bit. I'll give a little bit of context on Hitchcock and this movie. Hitchcock came up in the early 20th century and went to basically just as a young man worked himself up in a film studio, Paramount's wing of film production in Britain. He just got a job as a storyboard, not as a storyboard, but as a guy that would design the titles for silent movies. Because if you've ever watched an actual silent movie, you know it's not just text on a screen. It's like little pictures and curly cues, and it's very artistic. And Hitchcock had an artistic talent, so he went and he first worked in an advertising agency, and then that turned him into just a guy working designing titles, and he claimed he had no thought of being a film director. It wasn't like a profession that people dreamed about in the 1910s and 1920s. It's not like every little boy was like, I'm going to be a movie director when I grow up. It just wasn't a thing. I mean, he was alive before this medium even took off. So in the 1920s, he works himself into a job and then just kind of goes up the ladder and becomes an assistant film director and goes to Germany, sees what the German expressionists are doing, which, you know, Metropolis and Nosferatu would be touchstones, shadows and drama, high drama and high emotions and very vivid camera work. I mean, one of the pinnacles of the entire short history of film that we have is the end of the silent era before clunky sound technology came along and we had to nail down our cameras and everything got very static and boring and non-dynamic, but the end of silent film was so dynamic, and the camera was moving so much, and it was swooping in, and they were doing all these tricks and these dissolves, and you watch the height of silent film, and it actually feels very modern in a lot of ways. And so Hitchcock absorbed all that, and then he went back to Britain and started doing movies. Just kind of worked himself into a director, married the editor, who became Alma Revell, who became Alma Hitchcock, was working as an editor at the British studio where he first started as a title designer. And they became kind of a power couple. And she was, by all accounts, his right-hand woman throughout his life and had all kinds of control over these movies. And it's her taste that's dictating a lot of this stuff, and her weirdness that's dictating a lot of this stuff, just as much as Hitchcock. But like women of that era, she just stayed out of the limelight, and, you know, Hitchcock was the brand. She wasn't the brand, but she was arguably some of the brains. And now, of course, feminist scholars are making a lot of hay out of that, but I don't think that they're exaggerating it too much. It is true. In any case, Hitchcock just happened to do some suspense pictures, one of them based on the work of Rebecca author, what's-her-face, Daphne du Maurier, called The Lodger. And it was a big hit in Britain, and he became the suspense guy. And David O. Selznick over in Hollywood came calling and said, do you want to come and actually do Rebecca and do movies for Hollywood. And Hitchcock had no affinity for Hollywood, wasn't interested in Hollywood, the Hollywood game at all, but was interested in the Hollywood toys, wanted to be on, have Hollywood money and go to Hollywood studios and play with the latest technology. So Hitchcock goes to Hollywood, and really the rest is history. There's not a lot to say about Hitchcock's life because his life just was the cinema. You know, it's not like some interesting side story. He stayed married to his one wife all his life, had one daughter, had some interesting sexual obsessions that he explored pretty explicitly on screen with cold, icy blonde after cold, icy blonde after cold, icy blonde. He would get women like Grace Kelly and then Tippi Hedren under contract and kind of create them from whole cloth. I mean, it is weird what he did with his starlets. He would just find nobodies and then make them into these goddesses. And, you know, Grace Kelly became the Princess of Monaco, for crying out loud, or Monaco, however you say that. But yeah, his life is actually pretty boring. The interesting thing, like we already alluded to, is that he was a master of self-promotion. He began to appear in his movies. The audience began to like noticing him, and he had a very distinctive look. And so everybody would get a kick out of looking for Hitchcock. And then in 1954, I think he launched the Alfred Hitchcock Show, which he did not direct. And I think he directed maybe 18 of the 265 of those. But he appeared in every one of them as this personality, and he had this really droll sense of humor, and everybody just liked Hitchcock. And he had the musical theme, and the profile and everything. And he's just like Spielberg, like Walt Disney. I mean, I think those are the three, really. He was just a master of self-promotion. And so one of the real reasons that he's remembered is not because he was such a great artist that your mom and your grandma know his name. No, it's because he appeared on a TV show. And it's like Walt Disney. You know, I mean, you couldn't tell me who the master of animation over at Fox was, or, a lot of people don't know John Lasseter, but everybody knows Walt Disney because he appeared on TV, because he appeared in public, because he had a persona.
He made a theme park for crying out loud.
He made a theme park, and Hitchcock
named after himself,
right? And Hitchcock was just a master of self-promotion, a master of giving interviews. If you've ever watched a trailer for one of his movies, it's usually just Hitchcock. He'll walk out and he'll be like, well, I don't do a Hitchcock at all, but he'll say, I have a new movie and it's set at a hotel and some very bad things happened at this hotel. And he'll walk around the set of Psycho and kind of just show you. And the trailer for Psycho is hilarious, actually, because Hitchcock is funny, and he'll open up a door and say, in that room, the most terrible thing that you'll never, and then he'll stop himself and say, no, I can't even tell you what it is, and he'll close the door. He's so good at self-promotion and at promoting his work, and just, like Jake was saying, I think you said this on mic, you had books, you have a book somewhere in your library.
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
Alfred Hitchcock Presents, Mysteries of
Tales of Suspense or something like that.
Right.
Yeah. Tales of Horror and Mystery, whatever it is. It's his name on other people's stories.
Right.
That somebody else probably curated.
Right.
But it's his name,
yep.
And therefore it's in my house somehow.
Right. The one sort of...
Hitchcock gathered these stories. They're probably good.
Right. Yay! Like as if Alfred Hitchcock was pouring through.
I found the 12 stories that will guarantee to thrill the minds of readers everywhere.
Right. Yeah, but it's the same thing with Uncle Walt, I mean, like, these guys are just so good at...
You're going to go through, the thrift store and you've got the nephew or whoever who thinks he's into suspense or horror or thrilling stories. Are you going to grab the
generic book of scary stories?
Yeah, whatever anthology, or the Alfred Hitchcock Presents anthology of lesser stories than were in the
the generic book done by someone who cared.
Exactly.
Whose name you don't know.
Do you think they really don't? Because I would just bet that they do. I've never looked at a book of them, but I bet they coincide sometimes. The actual quality stories and the ones that are...
Yeah, I mean, I think
I'm sure.
I mean, Hitchcock didn't get to be Hitchcock by not having quality control.
Yeah, he understands his craft, at least.
Yeah, the people working for him are the best, and probably the best at collating. And it's just important to know that Hitchcock was a a brand and a very savvy businessman. And it actually was looked down upon by the establishment until the French, our good friends, the French, decided that he was an artist. And there's a famous, wonderful book, actually, called Truffaut Hitchcock, or maybe it's Hitchcock Truffaut. And that book is the French filmmaker Francois Truffaut interviewing Hitchcock. And Truffaut, who has appeared on this podcast before as Lamarck or whatever his name was in Close Encounters.
Yep.
Truffaut was just a worshiper at the shrine of cinema. And he saw that Hitchcock was not just a showman, what actually was a genius and a pioneer. And so he got Hitchcock, because Hitchcock was so savvy, Hitchcock would never really tell you what was his bag of tricks are. But Truffaut got Hitchcock to open up. And it's a wonderful book because Hitchcock just talks very freely about what he did and why, and how the shower scene in Psycho was put together, and the editing strategies behind these things. And if you want to know how movies are made and the kinds of tricks and the kinds of, I don't know how many times I've said something that's comes out of that book. You know, we talk all the time about the difference between surprise and suspense, which is a Hitchcock formulation that he gave to Truffaut, the bomb under the table, that either you either see it planted or it just goes off. If it just goes off, that's surprise. If you see it planted and then everybody comes and has a conversation sitting around the table, that's suspense. So Hitchcock was a very articulate man, and he ended up talking to Truffaut for something like 60 hours. And then every couple of years they'd get together and add to the book. And, and so in terms of the documentation of one man's process and one man's genius, Hitchcock has that. So both as a popular brand and as a sort of, whatever you want to say, high art or scholarship brand or an artisan brand, Hitchcock just hits both of those things. Huh. And as you read the book, what you see the kinds of things that made Hitchcock special. He cared about pure cinema. He wasn't interested in telling a story the way that a play tells a story or the way that a novel tells a story. He wasn't interested that much in character or in dialogue. He just wanted to do things that only movies could do. So actors would often find it very frustrating to work with him because he'd say, stand there and do this for the nenext 3 seconds. And they say, what's my motivation? And he'd say, a paycheck. And, you know, there's just all these stories. You know, he says to Henry Fonda, I need you to look up. And Henry Fonda said, why would I look up? It doesn't make sense for the scene and for I need you to look up because I'm going to cut to a shot of the clock and the audience is going to clock that there's a clock over there and and so in order to perform in a Hitchcock movie, and people like Stewart and Grant were aware of you had to just exist, which is something that a Stewart or Grant is good at. You have to just be. And then you have to
be capable of chewing up scenery.
Yeah.
And if you watch Grant and Stewart in Hitchcock movies, it's sort of like the pre-Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
Like Brad Pitt will always find something to eat to chew up scenery. They're always doing things with their hands.
Yep.
Always. And it's really, it's fun to notice that that's a trick that they have to rely on really hard to chew up scenery, and Hitchcock in particular.
Yeah.
And then it gets kind of annoying after a while, but man, they get really handsy in order to just kind of keep the energy, keep the attention, keep it interesting.
Oh, because Hitchcock doesn't care. He's going to say, I need you to hit that mark. There's an X on the floor. I need you to be there for my shot to work. And that's what I'm interested in. So, you know, say your lines, whatever. I'm not going to give you a bunch of direction or say, you know, try and get into. I really, not only do I not care, I'm actively upset at the idea that we would have to talk about your motivation. Your motivation is to do what
I tell you
so that the light can hit you, so that it can be recorded onto a film strip, so that we can tell a story. I'm the storyteller. You're not a story. You actor are not the storyteller. You're just another prop.
Well, that is how you feel about Cary Grant and North by Northwest. Like, it's like he's a creature of the story. It's not, I don't know. It's like everything about everyone is subordinated.
Right.
To what Hitchcock is doing. It actually feels that way, and I don't know.
It feels pretty stifling in its own way. When you've seen him in a movie which we watched earlier this year, in Philadelphia Story, versus here, he's got exactly one thing that he's doing in this movie, and he has 12 things he's doing in Philadelphia.
Right. He's playing a character with I'm just going to have to embrace this word because I don't know what the other one is, and I keep using it. He's playing a character with interiority, folks, in Philadelphia Story, where he really is just a prop. And
he's really a sex prop.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, let's be honest. Like, he just is his job is to be a walking sex god in this movie. Period. And that's it. That's all he's supposed to do.
And I would say Cary Grant obviously is one of the best of all time at doing that, maybe the best of all time at just doing that, at just existing. And Hitchcock loved working with stars. I mean, Hitchcock did understand that I need audience connection. I need movie stars. In fact, let's hire Cary Grant so that I can avoid setting up who this character is. The second Cary Grant walks out, you know exactly who Roger Thornhill is, and you don't need anything else. Same thing with James Stewart. Same thing with Fonda in The Wrong Man. Same thing with, as soon as Hitchcock got the clout, he just only ever worked with stars because it kept him from ever having to do anything to establish character. I mean, he said explicitly to Truffaut, I think, hiring a star allows me to shave 20 minutes off of my movie because I don't have to tell you who this person is. And we're downstream of that. So these days, movies exist in even more of a shorthand, I think, derived from people like Hitchcock. So something like Iron Man is going to take 2 minutes to tell you who Tony Stark is, and it's going to basically be based on Robert Downey Jr.'s star performance. Yeah,
and after Iron Man, no movie's ever going to take a second to tell you who Robert Downey Jr.'s character is.
Right. Precisely.
Because he's Iron Man.
And by that standard, we actually get a lot of, here's Roger Thornhill. He's got a secretary. He treats her this way. He, plays a trick on a guy to get a cat. Like, we actually, by today's standards, we get a ton of setup for Roger Thornhill.
Yeah, but it's not because Hitchcock wants you to care about him as he is in himself at all.
No.
In a modern movie,
what he feels like is necessary establishment. It's like establishing scenes and stuff like that. That's all.
But I feel like in a modern movie, if someone did that, I'd just be waiting for the schmaltz.
Right.
Like, you want me to feel compassion and sympathy and sadness at this character. Right. But Hitchcock, he doesn't care at all.
No, Hitchcock never went for bathos. Never went for pathos. Rarely. I mean, there are movies like Vertigo or Notorious where you feel bad for the characters, but you kind of feel like Hitchcock's winking at you, and you kind of feel, as an author, as an authorial presence, you feel him having fun torturing the characters and having fun maybe at your expense as you feel bad for them. Though you know that Hitchcock and the movie itself doesn't actually feel all that bad for them.
We're here to play a game, viewer.
Hey, guys.
You're in this contract with me.
Yeah. Right. Hey, guys. Here's Cary Grant. He's the star of this movie. In this movie, he's playing a madman named Roger Thornhill.
Right.
His secretary is going to call him Mr. Thornhill 5,000 times. Why? Because in about 5 minutes, somebody's going to call him something completely different, and it will establish that we have a case of mistaken identity.
Right.
The end.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, he is such a craftsman that there are characters throughout his movies that pop. They're always villains. Claude Rains in Notorious, Norman Bates in Psycho. I would say to some degree, Martin Landau in this movie.
Oh, yeah.
He's awesome.
Great.
Leonard, just skulking in gaily in the background of so many shots. Like, if you feel for anybody, it's kind of Leonard. And we'll talk about the gay coding, which was very explicit, and Hitchcock's having fun with that. It didn't sneak by him. Nothing that feels sexual in this movie snuck by.
Is accidental.
No,
or incidental.
Yes. Including, of course, the train, which Hitchcock enjoyed recounting to Truffaut in the book.
It's one of those things that, like, it's so ham-fisted that it can go over your head. Like,
well, that's why I thought it was worth even saying that. What we just said, like, it's all inside of his purview and his control, because you kind of, your brain just tells you, well, obviously he didn't mean that the phallic symbol with the train going into a tunnel there. That would be ridiculous. And why, how would they even get away with that? That's like Monty Python stuff.
Yeah.
But
so cheeky that it belongs in a sketch.
But Hitchcock was cheeky, and he was pushing the boundaries. And there's actually places in this movie. There's a line that Eve Kendall says where you can see her lips don't move right with the dialogue, and it's because they had to pull it back a little bit. She says something like, I never Oh, I don't remember. The real line is, I never make love on an empty stomach, but they had to change it to empty stomach. And so you can see her mouth, you can see her lips that say, I never make love on an empty stomach, but the dialogue that comes out of her mouth is different.
I think that's what I heard.
Yeah.
I think that's, like, I heard it the way it was intended.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't be surprised. And
I'm not sure.
Not like anyone's too confused, I don't think, about what Eve Kendall's intentions are in that scene.
Roger wasn't confused.
No, he was not.
She asked him if he was confused, and he said he was not confused. Right. He said that he understood her meaning perfectly.
Right. Well, she's a big girl in all the right places.
In all the right places. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's awful. I mean, it's awful.
We'll get to it. So you could go back to Philadelphia Story if you want to hear some context on Cary Grant. He was born Archibald Leach. He was a circus performer.
Leach.
Yeah, a Piccadilly circus performer.
Circus man.
A clown.
Clown.
Came over to America, worked vaudeville, got in movies, and created the Cary Grant persona whole cloth. The most famous quote of Cary Grant reflecting on himself is, he said, everyone wants to be Cary Grant. Even I want to be Cary Grant. And so he's not actually that guy. And I think the insight that we had at Philadelphia Story, which carries over here and just makes sense of Cary Grant's whole persona, is you can see a very serious guy lurking somewhere in there, observing coldly everything, all the clowning. And he is a perfect clown, as the drunk driving exemplifies in this movie. And he's very good at light comedy, and he's very good at banter, but there's always an angry, serious guy lurking somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Maybe that's why I didn't.
He wears it with disdain.
Yes.
Arsenic.
To tie into our bond.
Yes.
Sort of.
Yes, exactly.
It is a thing that this character and Cary Grant and all James Bonds have. Yeah, in some degree, certainly Sean Connery and certainly Daniel Craig.
Yes.
Have in common.
What were you saying about arsenic and Old Lace?
Maybe that's why it doesn't work.
Yeah, I think so. I actually don't like Cary Grant in some of his most bumbling, silly roles, because I don't think that they work. I've never liked Bringing Up Baby. I know people love Bringing Up Baby, but
I haven't seen it.
To me, he's just so silly in that, and it actually doesn't suit him. I mean, he can do pratfalls, he can be silly, but there has to be an undercurrent of self-awareness and of anger, I think. And Philadelphia Story might be the best.
We said that movie was just lightning in a bottle with casting and direction and dialogue and a script and everything. It was lightning in a bottle.
Yeah. So some very brief. So North by Northwest itself hits in the middle of Hitchcock's best run. Dial M for Murder, Rear Window are in the past. Psycho and the Birds are coming up. I mean, this is the peak. This is peak Hitchcock. Everybody knows who he is. He's a brand name, and he can do it. He's
had his TV show for like 5 years by now, or something like that.
Yeah, something along those lines. And he is working on a movie called The Wreck of the Merry Deer for MGM with a writer named Ernest Lehman. And they cannot crack this movie. Lehman comes to Hitchcock and just says, I don't know how to do this. And Hitchcock says, okay, well, we get along well together, so let's do something else. And Lehman says, okay, what do you got? And Hitchcock says, I don't have anything, but here's a couple fun ideas I've always had. I've always wanted to do a chase across the face of Mount Rushmore, and I've always wanted to have a dead guy at the United Nations. And here's just like some scraps from my notebooks, just like random stuff. Can we just come up with a Hitchcock plot to tie all that together? And I think you could tell, because the plot, frankly, of this movie sucks.
Yeah.
It is insane.
It's so stupid, but it's a handful of great set pieces. The like I said, the original concept for Mount Rushmore is that the hero would hide out in the nose of Thomas Jefferson and then would be found out because he sneezed. Hitchcock wanted the bad guys to somehow harness a cyclone and send it across the plains of Indiana at the hero, but the screenwriter apparently talked him into, maybe we could just make it a crop duster that might. And so they just concocted this crazy story, and Lehman was a former advertising executive and kind of a raconteur and a witty guy, so he's responsible for adding some elegance some wit to the, all the one-liners and stuff, of
banter.
Which this movie has much. And they just kind of, they basically just kind of strung together a bunch of Hitchcock set pieces with a dopey plot and figured that people would like it. And they were right. They were going to get Stewart originally for this role. It was going to be a much more unassuming kind of admin kind, it was going to be much more like, what this guy is up to his neck and he doesn't know what he's doing. And then at a certain point, they just decided, let's go with the more man of the world, Cary Grant kind of thing, and we can have a little bit.
He just keep asserting himself in these places,
right?
Instead of bumbling into them,
right? Well, and I think the Eve Kendall stuff, insofar as it plays better with Cary Grant.
Absolutely,
you can't really do that with
not with a sort of innocent bumbling Jimmy Stewart,
right? She has to completely
how he would have to play
Jimmy Stewart, and he doesn't even know what's happening to him, and it's just, you don't want to see that. So Hitchcock got Eva Marie Saint under contract and fashioned her into one of his patented cold blondes. Grace Kelly was married to the Prince of Monaco by now, so we can't have her. So let's just make another Grace Kelly, because that's what we do. So he got her, and Hitchcock personally picked out her wardrobe and her hairstyles, and taught her to look down and kind of have those bedroom eyes and lower her voice an octave, and kind of talk the way that she talks and do the thing that he does, because that's how Hitchcock liked his women, I guess. So he just, you can watch this actress. I think she was nominated, maybe even won an Academy Award for On the Waterfront, and she's very different. She's not I think she's best remembered for Eve Kendall, so we kind of think of her as this sophisticate kind of,
very knowing, seductive, but that's not actually who she was or what she was best at, and I don't know, the weird energy that she brings to Eve Kendall is interesting. This movie would, in some ways, maybe work better with Grace Kelly or someone who just felt more natural, but also maybe it's better to have someone that, given where the story goes, it's kind of nice, actually.
But everyone's pretending to be different things all the time.
Right.
So, and she feels, she does, I think that weird energy is like, which part of her is the pretending part and which is not?
Right.
And the movie is like, what matters is that they're going to have sex.
Right. Who cares?
I mean, that's how it feels to me.
Yeah, I think if the movie had any kind of moral sensibility, then we could say that all the romance was a little bit more of a put on, but the movie wants to have its cake and eat it too. It wants her to be that seductive and that for that to be a real part of her character, but then it also wants her to be the innocent kind of.
I was taken in by Cary Grant. Everybody is. Like, if he crawled through my window at night and I saw him there, I'd ask him to stay and come to bed with me.
But it's also kind of the standard James Bond plot of I was just an innocent waif who was taken in by, James Mason's character, when I didn't know what I was doing. So in order to buy that she was ever in this position to begin with, you have to buy her as kind of an innocent, girl from nowhere. But then
she turns into this,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it doesn't really make sense.
It's Ava Green's character from it's Vesper.
Right. Mm-hmm. But Eva Green's a fantastic actress, and I think she threads the needle in a way that makes sense of Vesper Lynn, as ridiculous as that character is on the page. Eva Green always feels consistent down to the places where she's being cold and the places where she's suddenly being vulnerable. Like, Eva Green's just a great actress.
But Eva Marie Saint is a Hitchcock creation and feels like it.
Right. Yeah. Which is fair enough. I mean, she works for the movie, but those scenes are uncomfortable. As we will get to, I don't think there's much more context. We were mentioning the musical score. This is by the great Bernard Herrmann, arguably the greatest film composer of the 20th century. I mean, obviously it has to go to John Williams, but Bernard Herrmann is in the running. I mean, we're talking Psycho. I mean, that's his most famous. He gave us that not jaunty, but that he gave us percussive strings, which
it's like, you hit the top of this movie in the title card and you're like, oh, like Danny Elfman kind of borrowed that for Spider-Man. Mm-hmm. And look, even the little cartoony graphics with the skyscraper stuff, that's like this inspired a lot.
Yeah. Just the credit sequence. But Bernard Herrmann is awesome. Bernard Herrmann, I think, the reason he was so influential, yeah, he did the Psycho score. Yeah, he did these motifs that we remember, like the theme from North by Northwest. But what he really pioneered was, I'm not going to be bombastic all the time. I'm willing to just do underscore that. I mean, you wouldn't even ever watch North by Northwest and think that that's what's happening. But compared to like, you watch Adventures of Robin Hood and just the whole time the music's like, Robin Hood, he is our hero, the greatest man who ever lived. You know, it's just like so in your face, telling you whatever. Or you watch even something like Casablanca and it's just like sad love story, da 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 da. You know, Max Steiner, Korngold, the names before Hermann, they're also on the nose. And Hermann, by those standards, was very subtle and was very willing to just design a soundscape and just use horn. I mean, Psycho is the perfect example. It's not something that you're going to hum, but boy, does it, you know, the shower scene in Psycho is the famous scene where you take the music out and suddenly it's like, okay, she's getting stabbed. How about that? But you have that thing and it just, you know, it does everything. So Hermann, very influential film composer and capable of working with major key leitmotif type stuff. And this is one of the best. I mean, this is a great score, great love theme, and particularly just a great adventure theme. Just adds so much to this movie, and it doesn't matter. I mean, he repeats that stupid theme 9,000 times. It's exciting every single time. And then Saul Bass was a graphic designer who did influence Spider-Man. I mean, this is the first, I forget what they call it, but those moving titles that kind of come across the screen, that was something that was pioneered for this movie. We had never seen moving titles interacting kind of in a three-dimensional space with a building or with anything. So that
still looks pretty cool.
It's pretty cool.
Still looks cool.
Yeah.
And
one thing downstream of it is Panic Room. If you go watch the titles for Panic Room. I love
the titles for Panic Room.
Titles might be the best part of that movie.
It's all downhill from there.
Yeah. It is the modern update to the same title.
Right.
And it is the same actual awesome score. Mm-hmm. It just promises everything.
Yes. Yeah, it's great. And I love a good title sequence, and I mourn the death of the title sequence. And Marvel can take a long walk on the sticks for helping propagate through all of its movies the death of the title sequence. And Lord of the Rings can take a long walk on the sticks, and George Lucas can take a long walk on the sticks, because all of those things were just like, we don't need title. But George Lucas still had the good sense to give you an overture and like some time to be like, oh, I'm in a Star Wars movie. This is exciting.
Beginning.
Yeah. Peter Jackson is really the one who killed the title sequence, because he was just like, it's Lord of the Rings. And we're in. Exciting action scene. And I think everybody's just keyed off of that. And Marvel has certainly keyed off of that. And it's too bad, because you need to be able to transition from your boring life and from watching a bunch of trailers for Coke and popcorn and stuff into the movie. Yeah. And that's what a title sequence with great music gives you. So, yeah. Yeah, I guess the only other thing I'll say, which I'm sure we'll talk more about, but if you listen to our James Bond discussion, we spent a good chunk of that discussion just simply talking about Kinsey and Margaret Mead. I don't remember whether we actually talked about Margaret Mead, but we talked about the sexual revolution. And this is a really interesting movie because it's right on the cusp of the more explicit sexual revolution. And you done see that things have already been pretty well revolutionized, but still not in a way that Eva Kendall can just say, I like making love, or I don't want to make love on an empty stomach. We can see them more or less make love, but it still has to be foreplay, and we still have to be a little coy about it. And while we're going to have a lot of fun with the idea that Cary Grant's had lots of wives and stuff like that, it's going to be a running joke, and there's going to be like the girl in the bathtub that's excited about him. And is that this movie?
No, in a hospital bed.
Hospital bed. Yeah. We're not going to just, we still have to kind of make it a central conceit of the movie. It can't be as casual as James Bond would eventually make it. But we're just one step from, but we're still feeling the need to buttress it with a lot of story and with a lot, like this, the whole point of this thing is bringing Cary Grant and what's her face, Eva Marie Saint together. It's not just a casual thing that James Bond does in between the plot of the movie. but we can talk more about that. Let's talk about this movie. So, title sequence. Anything else you guys want to say about the awesome title sequence?
Just that it's awesome. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
It's worth noting.
Pull it up on YouTube and watch it.
Yeah.
It highlights the score. It promises a lot. It's engaging. It's not, it would have been like nothing anybody had seen before.
Mm-hmm.
It's just cool.
And
it's still cool.
It's just as cool as anything I've seen in a title sequence.
So I watched an interview with, I don't know why I watched it, but I watched an interview with Dan Brown, the writer of The Da Vinci Code. And he's talking about how to create suspense. And he says, here's the only thing you need to know as a storyteller about creating suspense. Make your audience a promise. Tell them, if you keep reading this book, you're going to find out this. And make as many promises as quickly as you can. So promise them if they keep reading, they'll find out who murdered this guy. If they keep reading, they'll find out, if these two get together. Just put as much of that stuff in as possible. And since I read that, I've started to see it, and see how sort of...
That's a good handle.
Oh, what's the word? How explicit popular writers and popular filmmakers are about it. Like you read a novel by Stephen King and he'll be like, the terrible thing that was going to happen 2 days from now began to happen today. And you're like, what's the terrible thing? And it's just so naked and making you a promise. Like, one day Carrie would kill a bunch of people, but we're not there yet. She's just a sweet girl. It's not quite that bad, but it's almost that bad. And you read, you'll see it in the way that J.K. Rowling sets things up.
Oh, yeah.
And
that's what I was thinking about.
Like, you are going to find out who Harry Potter is and what these secrets are and who Voldemort is. And I'm just going to throw so many things at you and make you so many promises. And the best and most popular writers are the ones not who have good payoffs, but the ones who can make the best promises and then have some kind of delivery on those promises. So it can be a simple...
The truly great ones have great payoffs, but
yes,
popular ones just need to get you hooked.
Right. And so...
And the thrill of the hook is what people come back for.
Right. It's what grabs people. Every couple of years, a TV show will become popular. And usually it's because it's made a great promise. A bunch of people are on an island and we don't know why. And there's a smoke monster and we don't know why. And, people hung with that stupid thing for
6 seasons or 7 or whatever. I think it was 6.
Mm-hmm.
And, the writers made some really great promises and could only delay the inevitable.
Yeah.
Since they had no way to pay them off.
Right.
Oh, you wanted to cash that check someday? Well, I've got another season for you.
Here's an even bigger check.
With even more promises.
X-Files.
Yeah.
And Lost.
But anyway, I think it's something of a lost art. I think one of the reasons why sometimes a Marvel movie, I don't mean to pick on them, but they're just an easy thing that we all know. It's like they make some promises, and the best Marvel movies do make a lot of promises, but not in such a... I like the explicit promise that this title sequence makes. Like, this is going to be the most exciting adventure that you've ever seen. It's going to be full of modernism and of elegance, and just the way that building's framed and the way that the titles,
One review I read said it looks like or maybe it's been compared to by other critics, ledger lines.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is there is some thematic connection to the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
Reducing people to numbers and objects and symbols.
Yeah, and you have all these windows that you can't see in. It kind of gives you a sense of paranoia, but also a sense of adventure, also a sense of just the modern kind of city utopia, dystopia. There's so many associations that come from that music with those pop art titles. And it's just, most...
and then he's going to give you a beautiful shot looking down a skyscraper onto the sidewalk little area there. And it was a really creative establishing shot.
Yeah.
And he does a lot. He throws in a lot of those. Well, it's candy now still.
It is.
Because it's such a creative, beautiful shot. Nobody gets that view.
Right.
He gets views that nobody gets, except for the one person who sticks their head out of the the skyscraper window.
Well, the most famous and best one from this movie is of the UN after the guy has the knife in his back.
Right.
When he's running into the
love
cab.
that shot.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's...
Well, and it actually tells you Hitchcock's ironic, godlike perspective on all this, and it anchors you in how you should feel, actually. It says, like, yeah, we're all part of the rat race, and we're kind of observing this from above. You know, we're going to go down to the streets, but never forget that we as an audience stood above all of this, and we're going to actually stand above it the whole time, because this is kind of silly.
That is the title credit sequence, because you have all these people, you have all this energy and this excitement and the sense of people just, they don't really understand themselves or what they're caught in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the movie.
Yeah.
Yep.
The modern movie that I think does this sort of thing the best, that makes the biggest promise with its titles, and it really does excite me when I see it. It's Mad Max Fury Road, where you're a car revving, and then you see the title, big splashy titles come up, and they're together, and it says Tom Hardy as Max Rotowski and Charlize Theron as Imperator Furiosa, or whatever her name is. And there's just something so... These are the mythic characters that you're about to meet, and, you know, you don't even know who, Furiosa is, but she's worth telling you, like, Charlize Theron played her, and she's right there, and there's a car revving, and that's just George Miller being very classic and classy filmmaker, and knowing how to build excitement and suspense before you actually get to the best action scenes ever. And, yeah, he's a genius. So that's the title sequence. It's a good title sequence. How many stars, Ben, do you give to the title sequence?
Out of how many?
4.
4.
4 stars. Jake?
Out of 4?
Yeah.
4.
4 stars to the title sequence. I'm glad. Okay. Good job, title sequence. Then we meet Cary Grant. He's with his secretary. He's going to steal a cab.
He's sending sweet nothings to some lady somewhere.
Yeah.
There's also that moment.
Oh, you sent that last time.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'll use this one. Sweets, and then he makes a sexual joke out of it.
Right.
Yes. And then that moment with the porter. Say hello to your wife for me, or give my regards to your wife. We don't talk anymore. You just, all this little stuff that indicates Cary Grant is...
Yeah. He's a charming playboy that doesn't care and is amoral. And
It's going to walk all over anybody.
Walks all over anybody.
But just stole that man's cab. I gave him the gift of feeling like a saint, feeling really good about himself.
Which in any other movie, that's a setup for Cary Grant to have a heart at the end. No.
It's a setup for the same thing to be done to him.
Right. Yeah, it is, I think, the best thing you can say about it, the most moral thing you can say about it is they are setting him up for a fall, and they are making it even more fun when he has to scramble and he's out of his depth.
Yeah.
You want to see this guy on top of the world to start with, because we're going to pull the rug out.
Mm-hmm.
And having him be a little bit of a jerk about being on top of the world just gives us that extra bit of enjoyable schadenfreude as we see all the terrible things that happen to him.
Yeah, we don't feel too bad about the madman getting some kind of comeuppance. We all have a little bit of a chip on our shoulder about Madison Avenue guy.
Yeah, today...
Especially in the 50s.
Right.
Yeah.
Late 50s.
This movie just does not get made this way today. There's no way that a 1%er like this, an elite, is a hero. I mean, at least not without being even more thoroughly punished for his societal status. Like, George Clooney plays these kinds of characters, but he plays them as buffoons or as people who need to be punished. I mean, unless it's Ocean's 11. But in Ocean's 11, we're gonna go a long way to, set those guys up in opposition to the really snooty rich people.
Well, and then you're going to punish him by making Ocean's 12.
Yes. Yes, exactly. But you're going to go a long way to say, Danny and Rusty, they're men of the people, actually, within this elegant world of pure sex appeal and money and everything, where no poor people exist. Danny and Rusty,
they speak your language.
They speak your language, which is stupid and a lie, but it's a lie that we're all happy to.
It's fun to casually bring up George Clooney. He deserves to be brought up every single time Cary Grant does, because the man just is a walking, talking Cary Grant wannabe.
Right.
And every time I watch Cary Grant, I think, man, does George Clooney not apologize whatsoever for just trying to be Cary Grant.
But I think he does, because he makes these liberal message movies. Instead of just having a career where he makes North by Northwest, which he could. He makes movies about how stupid it is for him to be George Clooney. And he makes, I think at his best, he makes Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, where it's like, hey, look at me, I'm an idiot.
I can do the clown shtick.
Yeah. And then
watch me be in a drunk driving scene for an entire movie.
Right. And he's good. I mean, I like self-effacing George Clooney, especially when he's being written by the Coen brothers, and they know exactly how much we all hate George Clooney, and they know how to just play it brilliantly. But George Clooney could never just, besides Ocean's 11, where he made all his money by playing Cary Grant, so that he could then do a bunch of movies apologizing
Batman
for being
and Robin.
Yeah. Well, that was punishment enough for being Cary Grant, I guess. Cary Grant is wearing the best suit in all of cinema. I defy you to name a better suit. Daniel Craig wears some wonderful, very tight suits in those James Bond movies. But name a better suit. There isn't a better suit in all of cinema.
I've never thought about this question, so I just couldn't name one.
I thought about wearing my suit to the studio today in honor of Cary Grant's suit. I'll be on my suit and tie. But I didn't.
Yeah.
I guess I'm not going to show you a few things.
I guess not.
No.
It's a fantastic suit. I mean, you have the suit in, what's the name of the suit? You have the tuxedo in Jackie Chan's immortal masterpiece, The Tuxedo.
There's some great suits. Bond is always well suited and well tailored.
Yes.
The black suit in Men in Black is a pretty fun.
It's a great suit. I think that was kind of my mental reference point for suits growing up, I think, would have been that, yeah.
What are some other fun suits? John Wick?
Yes.
Is another fun suited individual.
You're looking up great suits.
I'm just trying to think.
I mean, Don Draper wore some great suits, but Don Draper is just doing Cary Grant. And Jon Hamm is another guy who deserves to be in the conversation with Cary Grant and with George Clooney. But Jon Hamm very explicitly made a career out of kind of puncturing the myth of Cary Grant explicitly, which is all that Mad Men is doing. But in order to do it, he wears a darn fine gray flannel suit, just like
Steve McQueen and Thomas Crown Affair.
Yeah, sure.
That's a pretty good one.
That's true. In researching this episode, I actually found a short story written entirely from the point of view of Cary Grant's suit.
Really?
Yeah, no, people love that suit. It has been voted. The real reason I'm bringing this up is not because I'm a fashion maverick or fashion maven, as you guys know, but the suit has frequently been voted the best men's apparel in all of moviedom. And, it wins all kinds of contests and best of lists and 100 best.
And it deserves to be up there for sure. I mean, I really did I had the thought of wanting to wear my light gray suit.
Yeah, no, Cary Grant knows how to wear a suit. The description I pulled up on this website says it's a lightweight, single-breasted gray flannel suit, ventless with 3-button fastening and notched lapels. The trousers have forward pleats, which is interesting. The suit is complemented with oxblood leather derby shoes and a gray silk tie.
Pretty classy, pretty classic.
It's very classy, very classic. Somewhat from my suit research, of which I did a little bit more than I intended. Somewhat forward thinking, I think. Like this suit was a little bit ahead of its time. Cary Grant actually wrote an article for GQ, the one article Cary Grant ever wrote in his life, talking about how to pick out a suit. And he says, you don't want to be too fashion forward, nor do you want to be too fashion behind. You want to always try and be right in the middle. And
right in the moment.
Yeah, right in the moment and right in the middle. And don't be too conservative, but also don't be too out there. And Cary Grant seems to have pulled that off because the suit doesn't feel old and stodgy. It feels like a good suit.
Well, this GQ article doesn't even list it.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Is it just new stuff?
No. So we got Pulp Fiction, Reservoir Dogs, Wall Street, Men in Black, Casino, A Scarface, A Single Man, Saturday Night Fever, American Gigolo, Talented Mr. Ripley, Crazy Stupid Love,
I feel like these
Chinatown.
Okay, that's 70s.
Great Gatsby and The Great Gatsby. So both Redford listed ahead of DiCaprio. The Italian Job, Catch Me If You Can. So we really like the look of Leo in a suit.
Yeah.
Goldfinger, Spectre, Kingsman, Coming to America.
But Goldfinger, I mean, the influence of this movie all across the board on James Bond is, of course, famous.
The Graduate, Knives Out, Wolf of Wall Street. We really like Leo in a suit.
Yeah. I don't know about GQ. I just don't know about Gentleman's Quarterly. Not my favorite magazine.
The Telegraph gives you North by Northwest at number 1.
Good.
Dr. No at number 2.
Yep. Correct.
And yet, it shows a picture of Daniel Craig at under Dr. No. So that's weird. And then it gives us Bond, or Connery. Ha. Then Thomas Crown Affair. And then Robert Redford's Gatsby.
I've never seen Robert Redford's Gatsby. I'm sure I've seen the image of it before, but...
The Man Who Fell to Earth. So we get some David Bowie.
Oh, yes.
American Gigolo. The Man from UNCLE. Uncle, however you say that. Henry Cavill.
Oh, right.
Skyfall Inspector.
Well, if I had to guess, the man from Uncle is probably pretty explicitly doing a James Bond / Cary Grant.
That's just basically what it all comes down to.
Right. The James Bond style is, let's see here. Henry Cavill suit. Oh, that is a nice suit on Henry Cavill. Well, in any case, I know that our audience wanted some discussion of Cary Grant's suit. And so there you have it, Cary Grant's suit heads. I'm glad that we could accommodate you. Anything else you guys want to say about Up Through the Restaurant and all the establishing stuff? I mean, Cary Grant is good at being self-deprecating in his way. You know, he realizes that he is a god among men. He's basically a living Ken doll, and therefore he can be as self-deprecating as he wants, and he doesn't end up deprecated. He only ends up being more charming. Mm-hmm. So he can say things like, think thin, make a note to myself, think thin, and stuff like that, just because, you know, who cares? And then he gets to the restaurant, and the plot kicks in. He answers that phone call for George Kaplan, and we cut to a couple...
He doesn't answer a phone call for George Kaplan, though. He wants to send a telegram to his mother.
That's right, yeah.
He just happens to raise his hand as the waiter or busboy or whoever it was, the waiter, is looking for a man named Kaplan. And then gets that same guy's attention, and the bad guys see him go to make the telegram.
By the way, one of the great mysteries of cinema history is what on earth was Alfred Hitchcock's relationship like with his mother? He never wanted to talk about it to the press. We don't really know. Apparently it was just fine. Like there's nothing there when you go digging. But man, the work of Alfred Hitchcock is full of some real pieces of work in the mother department. Of course, the most famous is the mother in Psycho, but you've also got the mother in Strangers on a Train, and Cary Grant's weird relationship with his mother, played by an actress who is exactly how many years older than Cary Grant?
No idea.
1.
No way.
Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Cary Grant's very well preserved, and she's not as well preserved. No. And she's a great, terrible mother in this movie. She's very funny. But yeah, Hitchcock just again and again and again and again in his movies, we have these weird kind of sarcastic and or outright diabolical relationships with our mothers. And it's just one of those threads you can pull on. And I'm sure, thesis papers, I'm sure PhDs have been founded on Hitchcock's relationship with his mother, but we'll never know exactly. So anyway, he goes to get the telegram and gets picked up by these two goons with great faces. Mm-hmm. And they take him back to the house of whatever that character's name is. Townsend, yeah. And we meet the great James Mason. I love James Mason and everything. I grew up with James Mason from playing Captain Nemo in the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea Disney movie, which was a touchstone for me. So I think that's where I know him best. But
still have never seen it.
It's great.
I haven't either.
It's really great. It's. I would say it's one of the Disney classics. I'd put it with in the same list with Mary Poppins and.
You say Finding Nemo is your favorite.
Yeah, is that what I said?
Yeah. No.
No.
No, I was like, I don't think he said that.
Yeah, no. James Mason provides the voice of the fish. I don't do a Hitchcock. I don't do a James Mason. I don't do voices for most people. But James Mason, name an actor who more embodies the quality of urbanity.
It's hard.
Of droll urbanity.
It's hard.
Than James Mason.
It's pretty great.
Yeah. I mean, he's just, I don't know what else to say, but he's fantastic. And he's got Martin Landau as his little lackey in the background. And would you guys say that they are straight men?
Obviously, he's got the girl, man.
It's more subtle than, I don't know, a lot of things.
Yes.
It's not as campy as I think, relatively speaking, the coding is pretty subtle.
Well, yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong.
You have the scene at the end where Landau says, "It was my woman's intuition." And then
Yes.
Mason says something like, "I want to thank you. You care about me. You really do." You know, it's just this like.
Well, and before that, he says, "You're jealous," doesn't he?
Yeah, he does.
That?
Yeah. There's
So
enough.
It's there, and
It's
especially at the end, what you have are a weird jealous lovers triad that shows up all the time in these types of movies where the bad guy's got a girl who's, Mission Impossible did it in that.
I was just thinking
amazing
of
Mission
the
Impossible
wonderful
2.
Yes. Yep.
But yeah, it's like there's a whole gay energy, gay vibe between the two dudes. I'm just looking out for you, and I'm secretly in love with you, and you're in love with me too. But also, there's a girl, and it's complicated, and I've got to save you from her because she's gonna betray us all.
Yes. Is it Mission Impossible 2 has a pretty explicit scene where the henchman comes and says, "This like this." It doesn't just have this scene.
It just has this scene. That's exactly
they
right.
copied and pasted
Oh,
it.
Yeah, and then he like cuts his finger off or something with a cigar
yes,
thing to punish him.
yes,
Yeah.
And that's like even that has some like gay BDSM vibe to it.
yep.
Yeah, I forgot how gross that movie was.
That movie sucks.
It's really gross.
Fun fact, I think that the only time that I've ever had to close my eyes in a movie theater was in a PG-13 rated Mission Impossible 2, but I could not stomach the idea of that finger hovering in that cigar cutter. It was like so visceral. This is how far my whole concept of ideas frighten me more than explicit gore or whatever. Like I think we were talking about with No Time to Die, because I claimed it was violent and you guys thought that kindergartner should watch it.
Yeah, that's exactly
I
what
think it was what she said.
We stand by it.
Yeah. But you would never. But if anyone bleeds, then you guys think it's violent. That's obviously
just kill everybody and throw them in acid. We're cool.
Yeah, completely fair representation
blood,
of your point of view.
no,
Yeah.
No, you got it right.
Yeah, for me, for whatever reason, you cut off somebody's head with a big blood splatter. It's like, I'm never going to see anybody's head get cut off. Who cares? But you have a finger hover. You have something relatable, like a finger hovering in a cigar cutter. And it's like, I've handled cigar cutters and I know what they could do to a finger. It's like, I can't even watch.
On some level, I agree with you.
Yes.
On some level, it is easier to imagine that.
Yeah. If it's relatable, I'd much rather watch an arm get hacked off than a paper cut. I mean, honestly, just not really claiming that that's correct. I'm just saying that's me. So anyway, that has nothing to do with North by Northwest, though, does it?
No, I don't think it does.
I just wanted to return to that argument and win definitively.
We were talking about Leonard.
Yes, Leonard.
Van Damme and Leonard.
Yes, Van Damme and Leonard, everybody's favorite band. Yeah, Martin Landau's pretty great. He does a lot just by standing there in this movie.
I, for whatever reason, I feel like it's not an accident that he reminds me of a cat and that Leonard sounds like leopard.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's an accident. Maybe the screenwriter is not really that intentional, but I don't know. Everything feels like, let's just click this into place too. Why not?
Yeah, this movie is very designed, even in the way that the characters are named, and yeah,
that's all.
It's great.
Something in Landau's performance, the way he looks, he like stares at you like a cat would.
Mm-hmm.
I have to think that
It's got those wide-eyed, sort of peering from the side.
a little discomforting, like, oh, now you're in my personal space. I didn't think you were going to do that. Like,
Right.
What are you doing? You never quite know.
The other thing that's kind of gay-coded about Mason and Martin Landau is just how much they they seem to enjoy whatever they're doing together. Like in Martin Landau, any number of times he'll just smile at James Mason's jokes, or I think the one in this scene is James Mason says, Cary Grant says, "I'm going to go see a play. I was really looking forward to it." And Mason says, "With such play acting, you make this very room a theater," or something. And then Leonard's just over there smiling at his boss's joke.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff like that.
Which I always enjoy it when people acknowledge that banter is witty. Sometimes in these witty banter movies, it's like everybody just exists in a world where everyone...
We're in banter world.
Yeah, here in banter
This is
world,
how we speak.
We all
There's
say the
nothing
cleverest
funny
thing.
or amusing about any of it. It's just how we talk.
Yeah.
Does the Vil ever acknowledge?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm sure we do.
I try to write in moments where people acknowledge that something is funny, or that someone, like if something would actually make someone laugh, they laugh. I don't know how. I mean, the Vil does exist by and large in banter world. It's true. You got me. I like banter world. It's a nice place to live.
Banter world. I was just thinking, like, huh.
I try to do what this movie does, which is acknowledge that it's in banter. There's a couple of places. I forget what it is with his mom, but his mom makes some snide comment to Cary Grant, and then he just goes, "Ooh," or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
I forget.
How do you feel about the whole scene in the elevator when she asks, "Are you two trying to kill my son?" And the whole elevator just starts laughing.
I love that scene.
She starts laughing.
It was pretty fun.
It's pretty good.
Yeah. It's just like...
They start laughing. Everybody else starts laughing. She starts laughing. He's not laughing.
It's fun.
This movie understands that there's more different kinds of suspense and more different kinds of payoffs than just violent action. You watch so many modern thrillers, and it's like the only thing that can possibly happen is a group of guys surround our hero, and then he decimates the group of guys, or they decimate him. And, everybody loves a good action scene like that, but there's just so many other different kinds of fun, violent, or suspenseful confrontations that can happen. And this movie has a number of them.
So this elevator fight or the elevator fight in Captain America Winter Soldier?
This?
Yep.
Totally.
I think so.
I mean,
It was worth asking.
Good question, James.
I acknowledge
Thanks.
that if we had a poorly cut together scene of Cary Grant beating up everyone in the elevator, that would be pretty great.
It'd be awesome.
Nathan, you're making me think of Man from U.N.C.L.E., which, like it or lump it, it does things like that. Like, oh, you thought we were going to have a boat chase action scene, but actually we're going to put that in the background and make you laugh while the other guy eats a sandwich because he dislikes his partner,
Right,
and hopes he gets blown up, and then finally decides he'll rescue him.
Right.
But that you're not even going to get to watch the boat fight, really.
Right.
That kind of stuff is funny, and that's a Hitchcockian idea of a scene.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, this movie has hanging on from heights. It has outwitting the bad guys with just clever ploys, whether it's the auction or the elevator. It has the whole drunk driving, weird, like suspense scene, I guess.
Yeah.
Which we're at. I guess we could just talk about it. There's the scene that I always forget and am vaguely baffled is in this movie, just because it's so silly. And it's kind of great, I guess. But I don't know. What do you guys think about the old Cary Grant drives drunk?
I felt like it did a surprisingly good job of evoking that.
Yes. The double vision and stuff.
Yeah, the double vision, the way he acts it out actually makes me think, I bet he's done that a couple of times.
My wife said to me as we were watching, she said, "Oh, I remember the first time we watched this movie. You told me about a time in your not recent past where you drove drunk and I was angry with you and I said, oh yeah. So we got to relive that. But yeah, now that you've forced me to admit it, Jake, yes, I have had those experiences. I'm not proud of them, and they're a long time ago. But yeah, this movie actually does, for all of Cary Grant's weird faces and stuff,
pretty credible job of evoking.
A pretty credible job of evoking, I'm trying to get something done, and I'm drunk, and I can't see, and I'm swerving all over the place. Cary Grant also is just a master clown. Like, his faces are so great, and everything that he does, like, you can tell this guy came up through clown school. He knows how to pull a face. And then all of his drunk acting is really funny with the police and the Emil Klinger, and all the...
But man, the drunkenness play acting goes on forever.
It does go on forever.
Really does. The movie just makes you watch drunk Cary Grant a long time.
Well, one thing that Hitchcock, I think, a place where Hitchcock has aged poorly, and it's not his fault, but it's just true, is the phony backgrounds in the driving scenes, and even in some of the places where Cary Grant clearly wasn't on location, but
we're not actually in a train station right now.
Right. We're just going to project. Usually you can just forgive that kind of stuff, but for an actual action scene, you kind of want to feel like Cary Grant's really there, and audiences of the time would have barely noticed it. It was just a conceit that they were used to, but man, feels so corny when people get into cars in these old movies. To me, actually, the drunk scene is done about as well, just because the light and the shadow.
I was going to say, yeah, the drunk scene actually is not as bad as any of the taxi scenes.
Yeah, the taxi scenes are just always,
as far as that goes.
Yeah, I would say the taxi scenes, the train scene, and there's one random shot in front of the UN where Cary Grant
very clearly, yeah.
Which I don't think was their fault. I think they weren't allowed to film in front of the UN. In fact, I remember reading that they stole the shot of Cary Grant. Like, they didn't have a license for it. They just pulled up, had their camera in a truck, said, "Hey, Cary, go run and walk into the UN building real quick." And he did it. And that's how they got the shot of him walking into the UN. But yeah, it does go on for a long time. But, and then it goes on for a long time. We're going to go to the villain's house, and we're going to meet his play wife, and she's going to not back up Cary Grant. And all of which works the first time you see the movie.
I thought that was fun, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely plays with the whole nightmare conceit of everything's kind of disappearing around me, and no one will back up my story, and I know what happened, but I'm doubting my own sanity. In its silly, cheerful way, this movie plays all that stuff well.
Yeah, I actually found myself wishing it played it just a little better and had a little bit more plants besides... We didn't see bourbon spilled all over the couch. He said it was, and then we had the liquor cabinet with no liquor in it, and that was kind of that. And then the wife or whatever was all that we really got. I wish it would have played with my head a little bit more.
Right, which Hitchcock is more than capable of doing and does in other movies really well.
He's cared about other things in this movie, which again makes me wonder why he decided to throw the kitchen sink at it if he wasn't going to throw the kitchen sink at each part of... If he's doing a greatest hits, don't sell yourself short. Like, this is a fun conceit. You can do it really well, and it works just fine, but I just found myself wishing that would have been more fun.
That's where you have to kind of agree with the New Yorker guy who said this is actually functioning halfway as self-parody. Like, Hitchcock's just not taking any of this even as seriously as he takes his. And it is important to remember this comes off of Vertigo, which was not a financial hit, which is a very dour and kind of weird and creepy movie, and very personal and very explicitly dealing with Hitch's hang-ups and obsessions and his weird view of women and stuff. So I think this is very this is consciously like, let's do something fun and light and breezy and commercial, and let's not take any of it too seriously, and let's not ask the audience to take it too seriously. Let's just have fun. And it worked. This movie made lots of money and was popular, and everybody liked it. So you can't fault Alfred Hitchcock's commercial sense in that way. But yes, going back to the movie, especially for the 12th time, you're like, I wish there was a little bit more meat on this bone, a little bit more to actually interact with. It is so surface level. But for a movie with absolutely nothing to say, it has a lot of surface pleasures that are worth going back to. But I'll tell you what those surface pleasures aren't. They are I guess we're not quite there yet. We're going to go to the hotel. We're going to find George Kaplan's stuff. We're going to have the elevator scene. We're going to have the awesome UN scene where the guy gets the knife in the back. I will just point out, this movie makes no sense. This plot makes no sense. And
got a room full of crowded people, and somebody's going to throw a knife in someone's back. Nobody's going to see anything,
right?
Except for him falling over. And then, of course, the one thing he's going to do is
pick up the knife,
pull the knife out of his back, and stand there and pose for a camera. That's also going to happen to be there in the right place at the right time. There is nothing about this movie that makes any sense whatsoever. And then he's going to manage to just run out of the UN and escape, having murdered a diplomat.
Right. put on one pair of sunglasses, get in a train, meet the world's most beautiful, sultry secret agent woman, have an affair with her, and then she's going to set him up to be assassinated by a crop duster assassin. Like that.
Which, of course, our bad guy would have already been on the exact train that he would have fled to with the girl there ready to go.
Right.
All of it. It makes so much sense. It's so.
But, one way that it does make sense is as a nightmare, as a just movie dream, which Hitchcock was good at delivering. It works. I mean, I think it makes emotional sense. And that's why the first couple times of watching this movie, you don't question it that much. And you don't really want to question it that much.
No, you just agree to suspend disbelief.
Right.
Because it's fun.
It's fun. And you've had those nightmares where you're innocent, but everybody's after you. Or you're in the middle of a cornfield and there's just the feeling of menace and something's coming after you and you don't. I mean, not to get too highfalutin about it, but I think Hitchcock is, as the talented director that he is tapping into primal feelings of fear and of desire and of all these things. And so it has a nightmare logic to it that makes a lot of sense. Like, if an assassin came after him in those cornfields, it wouldn't be nearly as effective as just this weird, mundane detail suddenly taking on a life of its own and trying to kill him. It all has a kind of logic to it that's emotional.
Yeah, and that sort of dream menace.
Yeah.
I'm here at a crossroads in the middle of a cornfield. And so there's scenery, there are cars coming down, and there's a car and there's a plane that kind of keeps buzzing around. And
yeah, I mean, that's like pure Freud, pure Jung, pure.
Yeah, and you can imagine yourself being in that dream and waiting for the other shoe to drop. And then sort of your subconscious just sort of latches on to one detail in the dream to come after you because it's waiting for the.
Yeah, it's almost, in that kind of dream, it's almost like you chose the plane.
Exactly. Yeah. Choose your destroyer.
Mm-hmm. Choose the form of your destruction.
It's Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even like, and then you get back and you tell the dream. And then for some reason, I thought the one way to not draw attention to myself on a dark train would be to walk around with sunglasses on.
Yeah.
Can you believe it? What an idiot. But in the dream, it worked.
Yeah. Well, before we talk about that too much, though, I think we're to Eve Kendall. So we got to talk about her and, just the Eve Kendall of it all. So Cary Grant meets old Eve Kendall on the train.
Mm-hmm. She covers for him.
Yep. She's not particularly a very realistic character. She walks around dressed up with like a perfect haircut and an outfit. And
everybody back in the 50s did that.
That's true. That's true. You talk to your grandma or grandpa, they're just like, yeah, we all had perfectly coiffed hair that would take 3 hours to do on your average train journey. Anyway, that's not good faith criticism because even despite the things that are problematic about Eve, it's not problematic that she has a haircut because that's just the movie that we're in.
She's a starlet.
Yep.
In an Alfred Hitchcock movie.
Yep. Anyway, Cary Grant and I keep wanting to say Eva Mendes. Cary Grant and Eva Mendes get in that train and they have their
They have what?
The discussion, Jake. They have a discussion.
Oh.
They exchange witty banter, and the movie pretty much grinds to an absolute halt.
Yeah.
And I imagine that most moviegoers at the time didn't care because they were so on the edge of their seat with the brash, I don't know how else to say it, with the eroticism of what this thing was doing.
She was very forward.
She was a very forward young lady. Yes, that is true. I don't know, guys. What is it? What do we need to say about this scene?
It was a lot.
Yeah. It was a lot. It was far more scandalous than anything in Black Widow.
Yeah.
For example.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm reminded of some article that our good friend, Pastor Joseph Bailey, sent us one time that was written within the last couple of years. I forget what the publication was, but it was about how we just don't care about sex.
Blood Knife, I think, was the publication.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I knew it was something weird like that.
Yeah.
But we just don't care about sex in movies anymore. We care about violence. We might even care about some kind of sterile pornography, but We do not care about
Sex, sexual tension,
or sex.
Well, and part of it is because of sex politics, right?
Right.
Like, for there to be real sexual tension, it has to be a man being credibly a man and a woman credibly being a woman.
Right.
And even if you're trying to subvert that, you're subverting it intentionally based on realities that are real.
Right. Yeah. This movie is a cartoon of that, but it's still a cartoon of real things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a fairly potent cartoon. I mean, I don't know. It does make you realize how sexless modern movies are. Even something like a Jason Bourne. I don't know why that's always our example, but it's just the first Bourne movie has one of those standard gratuitous sex scenes. And, I mean, I wouldn't want to let a teenage boy watch that. And if I was watching it with my wife or something, I'd probably close my eyes. But it's over so quick, and it's so kind of just bloodless and representative, and it doesn't.
That was the one, though, that Jake had talked about in terms of what's her name's bedroom eyes.
Yeah, okay, maybe that's a bad example, actually, because you have the whole haircut scene that actually does kind of achieve.
Yeah, there's some real build up there and tension.
Right. We were talking about Skyfall, and the conversation is coming back to me, which has another scene that's kind of like that
right.
Involves Miss Moneypenny giving him a shave or whatever. Yeah, so those are actually movies that have some real sexual tension. But so many times, even in the later James Bond movies, even in any Daniel Craig movie, it's just like, we're going to kiss, and then we're going to cut. That's basically what a sex scene is, usually, unless it's just you're watching Game of Thrones or something like that, and it's just pornography. But the vocabulary of sexuality that we all grew up with, was that. And it is weird to go back to a movie that's going to linger on, I don't know, I'm avoiding saying the word foreplay, but that's really the word.
Yeah, it's foreplay. It's erotic tension. You get the sex starts in the kitchen scene.
Right.
So they're at the dinner table, and that's where it's starting. And then
they're just kissing in his car.
In her
car, yeah.
Yeah. For a long time.
For a long time. It goes on. And bantering. And saying things like, I'm a big girl. And in all the right places, too. I mean, it's really smutty, actually. It
is, yeah. It's like kind of shocking.
Yeah, I think as a kid, when I saw this, or whatever, I don't really remember what age I was when I first saw this, but I assumed a certain level of elegance just because I didn't know any better. It's just like, oh, this is an elegant adult thing that I don't really understand. Now that I am an adult and I understand adult things a little bit better, I'm like, oh no, this is actually like Alfred Hitchcock never outgrew being a kind of a smutty 13-year-old kid about this, actually. Yeah. Like as much as it has the trappings of elegance, this is really pretty.
This is a scene out of a dime store novel.
Right. This is really juvenile. This is, yeah. I mean, he is evocative in the way that he skirts the censor by putting them in bed with a camera angle. It's some amazing filmmaking. If I can, I mean, like he just tilts the camera a little bit, and they're leaning against a wall, and they compose themselves such that they're suddenly in bed, but it's all symbolic. They're just standing in a train car doing as much as they possibly can under that particular ratings code. But I don't know. I guess the lesson is, don't think that just because a work of literature or a movie or whatever, I mean, we say this all the time, but just because they weren't allowed to do certain things or cross certain lines doesn't mean that they couldn't do a lot of damage while staying on one side of those lines. And Alfred Hitchcock was intentionally subversive in that way. He loved being subversive that way. He loved thumbing his nose at the censors while appearing to appease them. The famous example of that is in the movie Notorious, where Cary Grant and Ingrid Bergman are only allowed to kiss. Like the ratings code said that they could only kiss for, I don't remember what it was, but let's say it's like 1.5 seconds or something like that. Like the longest kiss that you were allowed. And so he just has them stand and kind of dance around each other and just keep kissing and kissing and kissing and kissing and kissing. And each one of those kisses is under whatever the rule was, 1.5 seconds. But he ends up obeying the letter of the law and actually making something that's way more sexually charged than it would have been if they just had one long, Princess Leia and Han Solo style.
Yeah, it's the take turns eating the apple.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
From what?
It's just the details are sort of eluding me right now, but it was another censor skirt thing where you're not allowed to kiss at all. So She takes a very luscious bite of the apple,
Mm-hmm.
and then he does, and then she does, and then he does. And it ends up managing to be much more erotic than if they had just kissed.
Yeah.
Much more suggestive.
Yeah. I mean, it is weird. It is weird how sort of prudish a wicked shot of nudity can be, and how erotic eating an apple can be in the hands of the right or wrong director, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I've watched this movie with multiple groups, and with, I don't know, I've seen this movie a bunch, and somehow I've seen it with, different Christian groups and different, at different things. And I've never been with a group that's not super uncomfortable during the train scene. So I don't know. You guys got any more deep insights into that?
I mean, there's not much more to be said about it, and you really don't want to linger on it too long.
Nope. All right. But what we do want to linger on is the iconic Cornfield Chase thing, which comes right up. After our night of passion, we end up in the cornfield for whatever reason, for a reason that makes no sense. I mean, there's nothing but there's no logic here. Why would the bad guys send him out there? Why would they hire a crop duster to machine gun him down? What's like, why not just break his neck and throw him off the train, or do any number of like almost any plan you could name would make more sense than the plan that our two villains, who just happened to be on the train that he randomly ran onto. Unless, I mean, was there a way they could have anticipated that? No, there was no way that. It doesn't make any sense that Eve Kendall would even know to be waiting for him on that train, correct?
But she was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Just trying to think if there's logic there that...
No,
there's no logic.
Mm-mm.
No, they were just there. The police are trying to catch up to him.
Right.
And he runs from the UN, gets in a taxi, goes to the train station, jumps a stile, and gets on this train where they're waiting for him.
And Eve Kendall's already waiting. It's not
waiting.
like we could have had Leonard following him, and then the bad guys are like, quick, hop on the train and set up our...
No, but they're all already there.
Right.
They have to be, because he barely gets on in time to elude the cops, who are just on his heels.
It's amazing. I'm not a plot guy anyway, but I don't think I've ever really thought about how much this movie doesn't make sense until now. And I've seen it a bunch.
It doesn't make sense. She's like, I'll call and talk to the guy, and here's the instructions. Get on a bus, go down Highway 41 into Indiana, wait at a crossroads. He does all those things. Then he goes back to the hotel, finds her, and has to figure out that she set him up.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
go to this specific place so that something terrible can happen to you.
yeah.
Well, okay. All right. Doesn't make any sense.
Impossible. That call couldn't have come he couldn't have checked out at 7, because she got the call. He sent me a message through at 9. What?
Well, Hitchcock famously pioneered the term MacGuffin, which if anyone out there doesn't know, it's the thing that everybody wants that drives the plot forward. It's the Ark in Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's the doohickey that James Bond has to keep the villains from getting, and everybody's fighting over.
Purple glowy thing in every Marvel movie.
Yeah, exactly. And Hitchcock said it never matters. It never matters what it is. It's just a thing. And, some modern movies like J.J. Abrams thinks he's being very clever in Mission Impossible 3 when they're all like, the rabbit's foot! And nobody even bothers to explain what the rabbit's foot is. It's MacGuffin. And I feel like I saw a movie recently where somebody was like, we have to get the MacGuffin. Like it was actually
I
explicitly
feel like I saw that too.
A joke, maybe like in a animated film or a children's film or something like that.
I know what it was.
What was it?
It was the Halloween thing.
Oh, the
Haunted Mansion.
The
Muppets
Muppets
Haunted Mansion. I actually called it a MacGuffin.
Yeah, there was MacGuffin in that. That's right. Well, there you go, folks. You would have seen it too if you'd watched Muppets Haunted Mansion, and your life would have been improved by watching that thing. No, I'm being serious. It was kind of fun.
It was fun.
So he goes to the cornfield, and this is Hitchcock elongating time. We are going to build up the tension and the tension and the tension, and we're going to wait, and the bus is going to come, and the guy's going to get off, the guy's going to get on, and it's like a Sergio Leone gunfight scene or something like that. Like you're just, something's coming, but we're just going to draw it out as long as we possibly
Except
can.
I'm not bored by Sergio Leone gunfight scenes.
I'm not bored. I'll be the classic film defender guy here. I'll wear that. I like the scene. I think it's reason, Jake.
I don't. I think it's iconic for no reason whatsoever.
How dare you attack this scene? No, I mean, it plays on my real fears of, I don't know, like I've gotten lost on highways before, or I've had cars pull behind me in the middle of the night when I'm on a country road. And for somebody who lives in the Midwest, I have a real fear of the Midwest, actually. I have a fear. I'm enough of a weird, like, guy that likes to think of himself as urban that I have a fear of what would happen if I ever got lost in the woods or went down the wrong road or was just on some barren highway. Like that whole kind of idea of there's something creepy lurking on the fringes of civilization, even American Midwestern civilization, is really evocative to me. So I find the whole idea of just being on this lonely highway, waiting for your doom, waiting for whatever form your nightmare takes, to be pretty creepy, actually. It's some of the same creepiness that Psycho gets right, actually, in that, you know, it just any hotel that you drive by, any old motel, there could be a killer lurking there. There could be something, you know, behind closed doors. Just that kind of feeling. I don't know. This Hitchcock has definitely taps into something of my own nightmares here. So I don't know. Is there anything else to say about the cornfield scene? It doesn't make sense. Also, like the particular maneuvers, as I believe Jake pointed out on mic, don't make sense. Like, why would Cary Grant just wait for the plane to do certain things? Why does he decide to stand in front of a truck until it runs him over? I guess he just really wants that truck to stop. Why does the crop duster run into the thing and blow up? I don't know. Doesn't make any sense.
Because we're constructing a cool set piece.
We are constructing a cool set piece, and Hitchcock is very, very concerned with the minutia, but not very concerned with the connective tissue. As long as it feels right, it's right. Okay, then we have what I consider to be the true boring stretch of the movie, which is we're going to have the professor show up, and he's going to explain the plot that he already explained. This movie has like some lame exposition dumps.
It really does.
The first one is lame. After they get out of the UN, we're going to cut to the professor
in the room.
Some of the dumbest exposition. It's like the worst trope. Now you all know, everyone in this room knows that we're doing this thing, and you know that it works this way, and you're all aware that
if this were to happen, that would happen. Because we've all discussed.
Right.
And furthermore,
you yourself, Carl, you were just saying the other day that if...
Now, have we covered everything that has possibly been said about our plan since the very beginning in summary form?
You know, Hitchcock was probably right. People probably are that stupid that they just want that scene. I don't know.
Well, what it does is it makes you feel like, actually, don't worry about anything you think is a plot hole. This movie has a boring, reasonable explanation. Just don't worry about it.
Right. And we're not actually even going to really give you that explanation for any of the real plot holes. But
no.
Just know there's a bunch of boring people somewhere that are discussing
in a room, sitting around a table, that have this all figured out.
They're not in suspense.
They called my writing team.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And basically, we are just seeing Hitchcock and his writers. Now, let us explain the movie to you. But then the really dumb part is that professor guy shows up and he explains everything to Roger Thornhill that we've already heard again. Like, we get two of the exact same explanations. I have no idea why. But I trust Hitchcock was probably right. I trust he probably knew his audience and thought that they needed to be anchored or oriented by something boring if he was going to get away with all the exciting
And then our
stuff.
professor, FBI agent expert who's been trailing our criminal mastermind for years gets fooled by Cary Grant, who asks some question like, now, you say that he's taking her away here and there tonight, right? Oh, okay. Say, why don't you go find me some bourbon? Bring some back for yourself. Right, I'll do that.
He fell for it. He fell for it.
All while Cary Grant was signaling to the audience exactly what was about to come.
Yeah, Cary Grant might as well turn to the audience and just wink.
Yeah.
I mean, I like it. It's fine.
Yeah, but as long as we're talking about plot holes, that's all I'm saying.
I mean, I think it's worth noting. I can never remember what the plot of this movie is, and it's so simple.
I couldn't either come into it, and I feel like I've seen it. I feel like I've watched it pretty recently.
Yeah, I mean, I must have seen this movie 10 times, and watching it again, I was like, oh yeah, he's subbing in for a guy that never existed. Like,
yeah, I had forgotten that too.
Yeah, it just does not matter. It's all about Cary Grant being awesome and the set pieces, the individual set pieces. I guess the other thing that is actually worth pointing out about those boring parts is that Hitchcock does not do anything to spice them up. And I think it's because he wants the exciting parts to be exciting. He understands that there needs to be valleys in order for there to be peaks. And so for a guy who's so acclaimed as an awesome technical filmmaker who would storyboard every shot, who would think, have everything controlled to a suffocating degree, oftentimes, and for a guy who's acclaimed as someone who would do show-offy things, often many scenes go by without anything show-offy happening. It's just the most basic, coverage, over-the-shoulder shot, just cut together, like nothing's happening this is just like the most generic thing possible. And it's precisely because he wants it to pop when it does pop. The best example of that is when early on, when Cary Grant goes into the restaurant, he's talking to his friends. It's all really, really boring. And then suddenly we're going to have a musical sting and we're going to have this fast zoom in on the two thugs that are clocking him for the first time. And it's like, we're mundane, and then punctuate it with something awesome. So we're getting to the end here, guys. Is there anything else you want to talk about before we get to the house?
I don't think so.
All right. So we get to Van Damme's awesome house. What an awesome house.
Very Frank Lloyd Wright.
Very Frank Lloyd Wright.
Yeah, it is.
Mid-century. Yeah. And
I love that house.
Big open floor plan, just enough like wood and stuff to give it a little rustic flavor. That house does not exist, unfortunately. It's not a real Frank Lloyd Wright. It's just a set and a beautiful matte painting for the wide shots, which if you don't know what that is, it means some guy painted it to look realistic. So yeah, but that house rocks. What do they call those things? Cantilevers? Is that what it is when like stones and things just jut out? Like, I don't know.
That sounds right, but
I don't even know if that's how you say it. I'm not an architectural expert. I'm not an architect, nor do I play one on this podcast.
Yeah, that's right. It's a cantilever.
Yeah. Like when it's, how would you describe it? When it's just like a part of a building that just juts out and isn't supported, like a beam that's not supported by anything.
Only supported at the end.
Right.
At one end.
Yeah. Yeah, no. It's awesome. And I just love that house. And I love sneaking around, and I love trying to get the letter to her, and I love the villains being as gay as they possibly can there at the end. I don't know that I have anything else much to say about that scene, though, besides that it's really evocative location. Yeah. Then we're running across Mount Rushmore.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about the Mount Rushmore chase, Ben?
Oh, I should say, I'm just going to steal stuff that I've read from here and there.
Yeah.
So Cary Grant has a uniform change, like a white knight uniform change. You see him in white, basically, where
Right.
you've just seen him in like a neutral color before.
Mm-hmm.
This is stuff other people say, folks. And and so it's like, finally he's taking action, like he's the one, he's not just reacting. He's like going to go after the girl, going to save her.
It's funny. I don't think of Cary Grant. If you track his character, he is a very passive, bumbling character, but I don't really think of him that way. Maybe just because he's Cary Grant and he's so...
He's Cary Grant.
He's not passive.
Yeah.
I mean, he's going to walk into the auction and go sit down with the guys that are trying to kill him. He's going to go back to the house with the police and do the thing. Okay. Well, that's not going to work. Okay, fine. He's going to go figure out where this guy that he's supposed to be lives and break into his house. He's going to call the porter and ask if he's been seen. He's going to, now I've got it. Okay. All right.
Right.
Now I know I picked up this thing and it's something about the UN. All right. I'm going to go to the UN. I'm going to find the guy. Oh, it's not the guy. Oh, I'm going to run. I'm going to do he's just very actively, anybody else, most people in that situation would be happy to be alive and let the story die, pay their $2 fine like Mom said,
Right.
let the story die and gone back to their normal life and hope that nothing followed them.
Yeah, that's true, as I think about it. Even when he's captured by the two guys at the beginning, he's going to try and get out the door, and the door is locked.
Yeah. So the change is more that like at the end he has a handle on it. Like
Right.
he knows positively what he wants. Not just like, let's figure this out, but like, okay, I figured it out. Here's what I'll do in response to the entire situation.
Yeah, I guess if the word passive even occurs to me, it's because he's trying so many things and he's getting swatted down
Yes.
at every turn. Like nothing ever works. He never gets ahead of the game until the end.
Mm-hmm.
When he's jumped to the head by the professor.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. But then we're running across Mount Rushmore. That's all sets and paintings and stuff like that. But it works really well. Even like you don't have to put on your old movie glasses to see for most of that scene, minus the people, the lame like dolls that fall off when anytime someone falls, they suddenly transform into a mannequin and kind of go, "Wah!" But other than that, I think it's
Or we just get the guy laying down and we're going to spin him around.
right. Yeah. It's very silly looking.
Which part?
When people fall off, like when people,
One of the I think the thug that,
not Leonard, but the other one.
Oh, the
Yeah,
guy who
the-
throws the knives. Yeah.
when he goes over the edge, he gets that sort of like laying down posture.
Yeah.
Like we just cut out a pose of him.
We cut it and then we spin it around and make it smaller as it goes
Right.
down into the canyon
Yeah.
or off the side of the mountain.
It looked better than Jack Nicholson falling off the tower in Batman.
Oh man, yeah, that's pathetic.
Yeah.
There's lots of bad falls. For some reason, people
Falling
falling is really hard,
It's hard.
to do. The greatest, of course, is Hans Gruber. You
Oh,
can't beat that.
that one's awesome.
And that's because they just dropped poor Alan Rickman. Like they green screened, but you can find the footage of Alan Rickman terrified for his life as he drops, a couple stories into like one of those big pillows,
Wow.
basically. But it was worth it because
I didn't know that.
Hans Gruber's death is one of the best deaths in villain history, maybe the best villain death.
Oh, yeah. You've got that musical sting,
Right.
the Die Hard series
Mhm.
behind him as he falls.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then you've got Bozo the clown being like, "I hope that wasn't a hostage." I might have to deduct some points for that. But
That's how Die Hard is, man.
yep, Die Hard gets lots of points given and lots of points deducted for many, many reasons. But yeah, falls are hard to do. Falls are hard to do. Muller Ram has a dumb fall in Temple of Doom. His henchmen have great falls. When Indy cuts the rope bridge, all the bodies flail really convincingly as they fall, but then Muller Ram falls and bounces off a rock or something like that.
Yeah.
It's really kind of lame, unfortunately. And then we cut to the alligators eating someone's discarding carded clothing or something like that. So Spielberg could not improve on Hitchcock's crummy falls. But yeah, I'm not sure what else to say about the Rushmore sequence. It's fun. It's always a little shorter than I remember it for such an iconic scene.
Huh.
What?
It just, I don't know. Maybe I was just in a rush to get that movie over with, but
Felt long to you?
felt kind of long to me.
I like that. I think that's probably my favorite scene of the movie. I think it's because it looks like everyone is getting hurt, and like anyone could actually just fall off accidentally at any time
Right.
without a fight. And it makes me feel like
It's almost
maybe
like that. It's almost as great as that Shang-Chi
scaffolding fight.
scaffolding fight. Yeah.
Right up there.
Yeah.
Well, I like the fact that it's as awkward as it would be. I mean, we don't see enough of that in movies even today, or especially today. Like, it is fun that Cary Grant, even when he's like wrestling with the guy, it's just kind of awkward and neither one of them wants to fall over. And
Yeah.
like, if Eve Kendall does slip and die, it's going to just be because she's wearing the wrong shoes and she kind of slipped, and it's not overly dramatized. It feels like it all plays out about like how it would play out if you were slowly, awkwardly trying to get away from assailants across.
Even Leonard's the most feared henchman, but he almost falls and dies before he even gets anywhere.
Yeah. That's what they should have done, actually. That would have been funny. But then you wouldn't get the wonderful cavalry arriving and
he takes him out from that range with like a handgun or something that. It's pretty awesome.
And then we decided we needed to give James Mason not very sporting, is it? Or something like
Final line.
Yeah. Van Damme's going to be cool and urbane to the very, very end.
I still exist in this motion picture.
Yeah, that's basically all it is.
Oh, yeah, you are the villain.
Yep. I guess we don't care about you. And then the ultimate, we don't care about the payoff. We really only care about the setup. We're going for the girl. We're going for the girl. We're going for the girl. And we're on our honeymoon, climbing into bed together. And a dirty, dirty visual pun that a 12-year-old would think was funny will end this classic Hollywood, old Hollywood classic.
The more we talk about it, the more I want to watch it again.
Well, let's litigate it. Where do you guys put this? Is this a movie that you would recommend that our listeners watch? Is fun? I don't know, Ben. How many faces on Mount Rushmore out of 5?
4, I believe.
We need more to work with. How many? Boy, what's something that?
How many little statues filled with microfilm?
Yes.
Or something.
How many little statues filled with microfilm out of?
Yes, they couldn't figure that out. The FBI couldn't figure that out.
That's how he's doing it.
Whoa! Yeah.
He keeps going to these art shows and bidding on these pieces. He's a real art collector. Well, he is gay.
By the way, that auction scene is pretty funny. I do like that auction scene.
Yeah, I like the auction scene.
And I like it when a hero can get himself out of something by being clever, as opposed to just having more brute strength or more. It's one of the reasons why I think Doctor Strange, while not my favorite Marvel movie by a long shot, in fact, one of my least favorite Marvel movies, I like the ending of Doctor Strange. The way that he defeats the monster actually required a little thought on Doctor Strange's part, as opposed to having superior.
You find the glowy thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. True. Exactly. So I like intelligence. I like intelligence winning in these kinds of things, as opposed to brute strength or heart. I mean, it's always usually brute strength, or you just know that you love, or you know that you can dance, Chris Pratt, or you know that we're a family, but it's nice when it's just like, no, I'm smarter than the bad guy. And that means the screenwriter had to be smarter than the audience. And if the screenwriter successfully was, then the audience is more entertained. So, Ben, how many statues of microfilm out of 90 do you give to this film?
On a level of personal enjoyment, I'll give it probably 75. On a level of recommending it to other people, probably give it like, I don't know. It depends on who are we talking about? A 13-year-old boy?
0.
Yeah. Are we talking about even I don't know. I don't know how to recommend it or not, because I don't really want to recommend it. I think it's a good movie to see if you're a film buff on some level. And the eroticism is, I haven't seen it since I was aware that it was in there. So I guess I must have been a kid. So the eroticism is very intense.
Yeah. And it goes on for a long time.
It goes on for a long time. And it was hard to take.
Yeah.
So I don't know how to answer your question. I feel like I'll give an unfair answer either way.
Right.
Sorry.
Well, I don't know. Maybe Jake can help with that question.
I bet he can.
Jake, what do you think?
I don't think I can help.
Can't help? All right.
I feel kind of the same way. But I feel like I've never enjoyed watching this movie less than I did this go around.
Right. But there were any number of, to be fair, without going into them, there were any number of external factors that may have
influenced that.
You had to watch it on the deadline this morning in order to come and podcast with us.
I was going to watch it last night with Amanda, and then things happened. So.
Right. Generally not the best way to watch a movie.
Yeah, sitting in bed with a headache, watching it on your laptop.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Premiere North by Northwest experience.
Good memories.
Yeah. I'll make a recommendation. Watch this movie. It's great. Just fast forward the crap out of about 10 minutes in the middle on the train there with the chick. You have the power. You have the remote. Very easy. You won't accidentally fast forward past anything that'll be all that erotic and fast forward. And you'll miss nothing. You'll have a more short, punchy, exciting movie experience. And yeah, you'll miss none of the plot. You'll miss no important details. And it's the same thing that you do with Braveheart. You just don't watch the waterfall scene. You'll be all right. Except for you probably won't, because Braveheart probably has other stuff. But, I'm not a fan of VidAngel or services like that, because I do believe in artistic expression to some degree. But I am a fan of dealing with these things on a personal level the way that you want to. And this is an easy one to deal with. So there you go. Minus the Eve Kendall scene, I would give this 800 microfilm
I think we said
Out
90.
of 90?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this movie rules.
You must.
It's kind of boring, but in some parts, it's slow by modern standards. But for if you're a film buff, if you care anything about this stuff, then it's pretty exciting. I wish that we had 3% more heart to Cary Grant's character, maybe. And I don't love Eva Marie Saint. I don't know. We didn't talk that much about her. Do you guys like her as a character?
No, not especially. I think, well, as a character, the role's fine, but I'm not a huge fan of her. It's not like, Grace Kelly glows even when she's playing cold, and, she's a likable person. I don't know.
Grace Kelly is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Eva Marie Saint is like a space alien in this movie.
Yeah. Hitchcock's asking her to do a bunch of ridiculous, unplayable things. In order to make that work, you kind of have to have the star wattage of a Grant or a Grace Kelly or Jimmy Stewart. You kind of really need A-listers.
You can think of 5,000 actors who just, if they're not Cary Grant, this movie's such a horrible drag.
Yeah.
But he's fun to watch on screen because he's handsome and charming and charismatic. He just has that star wattage, that je ne sais quoi.
Right.
And so, and it's overplayed in the movie. It's really just like, you've got one note. It's you're super charming, sexy man.
Mm-hmm.
But, somebody like Grant can credibly pull that off for 2 hours and 20 minutes.
Right. And he can modulate it just enough in any given scene to make it a little interesting. And
yeah, so you've got to be able to play off of that and play opposite that. Ingrid Bergman can do that kind of thing.
Yeah, the great Hitchcock women are Ingrid Bergman, and obviously Grace Kelly is the great Hitchcock woman, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah. She just doesn't quite make you ready to see her in another movie.
Well, the weird thing is she actually feels like, to me at least, she's doing her best as a good actress to make this stuff play. And that's not really what you want. Like, Grace Kelly may well give technically a worse performance, but she's just got that X factor, that star wattage, which is really what you want. Mm-hmm. Hitchcock's telling the story with his camera. He doesn't care about the actors. We just need people who can exist on screen. And unfortunately for whatever that actress, Eva Marie Saint, like, she's trying to act, and that's actually the wrong move.
Mm-hmm.
You want James Mason to just be urbane James Mason, and you want types, and she's not a type. She's actually giving you, she's trying, buried underneath all the artifice, she's trying to give you a real Eve Kendall. And there's moments where you can feel what that might be, and you can respect what she's trying to do. I don't think she's bad at it, but it's just not exactly what this movie wanted.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. You cast that part today, you gotta go to ScarJo, or maybe the ScarJo of a couple of years because she's aging out of these parts. But you have to have someone who's like pure megawatt. Cast it back in our day, I guess it would have been Catherine Zeta-Jones, perhaps. I don't know. Who do you cast this movie with? Who's the star? Who's the Cary Grant of our time? That's age appropriate for the part, because George Clooney's too old.
Who cast it today?
Like right now, you have to make a remake of this movie.
Well, you've got to give him a more. You still have to go a little bit more effete, I guess.
You don't have a choice because we don't have men's men anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could ask Brad Pitt to do something that's a little bit more on the. Yeah, but
he's so laid back. You need somebody who's going to have a little bit more fun with it. Huh. Maybe. I
mean, what you do, for the longest time you did in any role like this was just cast Will Smith.
Yeah.
And maybe he's aged out too, but
he might be appropriate Roger Thornhill age.
I mean, just somebody who's charismatic, has that megawatt personality, and and can have fun running in and out of this and that situation.
This is so boring that I almost am about to fall asleep as I say this, but the person that actually could pull this off effortlessly, maybe you have to go back 10 years to his prime, but Robert Downey Jr.
I knew you were going to say that, yeah.
And I'm ashamed that I said it because it is boring. It's so boring.
Yeah,
but
it is.
But he really is just about the modern equivalent in terms of someone who just can shine through a bunch of schlock and just bring his own.
They could have Tom Hiddleston do it since we're in the MCU.
Yeah, that's true. Wouldn't want any of those Chris's to do it. I don't want a single Chris.
No Chris's. Oh, Chris Pine, maybe.
Yeah,
but he's not an MCU Chris. But of all the Chris's, he is the Chris that could maybe. But he's still pretty boring. He's pretty flat.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
You don't want to see the Pine Godot North by Northwest.
No, sure don't.
Wow.
That would be really boring.
Mm-hmm.
Although
you remember that part where they like take over some other dude's body, and
I guess we got to see the Pine Godot North by Northwest, and it was terrible.
Oscar Isaacs?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
You could ask him to do
fun.
that.
I put Oscar Isaacs in anything, and I'm happy. I don't know whether that's because he's right for the part or just because Oscar Isaacs is always right for every part. But
well, no one will write him a good script.
Yeah, nobody ever does. But
except the Coen brothers.
Yeah. Yep.
I really kind of hate that movie though. Inside Llewellyn Davis.
Oh yeah.
I hate it. It's so mean. I mean, it's just a deconstruction.
Yeah, it's one of their least likable movies, but it does have a certain quality.
It has a certain quality. It makes full use of Oscar Isaacs.
You know who's just such a great likable actor in my book that I would put him in here, even though he's totally wrong for it in a lot of ways, is Adam Driver. I would like to see the Adam Driver anything, and if you paired Adam Driver with the right chick, you might have something.
Yeah, but what we really should be thinking is, who do we cast as our next James Bond?
Let's see.
And that's the answer.
Well,
tell me I'm wrong.
No, I think you're right, but I don't know.
Because if you want masculine verve plus class and raw sex appeal, that a guy can get behind. That's how you cast Bond.
Yeah.
Right. Guys want to be him. Girls want to be with him.
Yep. You know who actually might still be just age appropriate for this? And could we get behind the Ben Affleck?
I had been toying with him. I think he's too old.
He's just too old. Yeah.
And
before
tired.
He was too old, he was too young. Like he never had that perfect phase where he was a mature human being and also
still, like that phase that DiCaprio and Damon seem to try to inhabit for forever.
Right. That they're both just freshly aged out of these days.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, DiCaprio in his prime, when he was doing all the Scorsese stuff, probably could have done this just because he was capable of pretty much anything, and he knows how to use his own star wattage well.
Yeah,
even though he doesn't like to do it as much. Well, I don't know who they cast to play the next James Bond. What movies have we seen lately? Is there somebody in Dune? There's nobody in Dune that you want to play Roger Thornhill.
I mean, we already said mentioned Oscar Isaacs,
right.
But
he's the one of all of them that you would pick out of that. You're not. I mean, we can do Josh Brolin.
No.
Jason Momoa.
Brolin in his prime maybe could do it, but
he would bring a pretty different edge to that material.
He would be very different. You kind of have to go back to our teenage years and give it to like Clooney and Julia Roberts, or Clooney and Catherine Zeta-Jones.
Yeah,
I mean they could do it effortlessly. Did Clooney and Catherine Zeta-Jones ever do? Oh, they did that weird, terrible Coen Brothers movie.
Never saw that one.
Well, folks, if you know who should be in North by Northwest, call 1-800-SANITY by Sanity West. Punch that into your phone right now. Whoever picks it up will be waiting to take your information and your credit card so that we can get your information on who you think should be in it. I think we've been defeated. Johnny Depp.
Right. Oh, but instead of Johnny Depp.
Yeah.
The guy that should have been the character that Johnny Depp played in that movie.
Oh, Colin
Farrell.
Oh, Farrell would be good. He might be aged out at this point, too.
Yeah.
But Colin Farrell was always good in everything. Jude Law, for that matter, would have been good when he was the right age.
Mm-hmm.
That whole crop of guys that were too handsome.
Ewan McGregor.
Current Ewan McGregor might actually be able to do it. I mean, he'd be playing the older side of Roger Thornhill. But yeah, that's it. That's intriguing. The Mandalorian. What's his? Pedro Pascal. Charismatic.
Life is good, but it could be better.
It's true. And Gal Gadot as the chick. I'm sticking with it. All right, folks. So I'm giving it 10,000 microfilm statues if you skip that one scene and if you like boring old things. It's pretty good. Oh, and speaking of boring old things, I'll tell you who is the opposite of all of those adjectives. As soon as I pull up his name or her name, I will tell you. Oh, of course. It's Keith. Keith is our Patron Choice Award of Awesomeness winner.
Wow.
And you want to tell the people why Keith deserves to have that honor?
Yes, it's because if Keith were ever forced to go undercover because a gang of criminals mistook him for a fake FBI agent,
As one does.
it would all make sense in the end.
It would all make sense on the end.
It would be very coherent.
This is true. Well, thank you, Keith, for being awesome. And
Thank you for being coherent.
Yes, thank you for being coherent. Old Coherent Keith, we call you. And until next time, folks.
You could always take a cold shower. Sorry, it's the first one that came out.